Welcome to the Bayesian Conspiracy. I'm Iniash Brodsky.
I'm Steven Zuber.
I'm Jay Sticky.
I'm Matt Freeman.
And we're pointing at the computer.
And Daniel can't see me pointing at the speaker we have here.
I'm Daniel. Hello. Right on cue.
Hey there, Daniel. Daniel and Matt are the Freeman brothers. They have their show on the Doofcast, Doof Media Network. Is that what it's called?
That's right.
Okay. They are also guests here several times. We've talked to them about AI stuff before. Matt about various things. He's into the Denver rationalist scene. And we are here to talk about AI stuff yet again because there has been more advancements.
Yeah, it was kind of funny because me and Daniel did a Freeman Bros episode the day after, or the day basically that one of the AI breakthroughs came out, and then literally like the next 3 days were just a series of more shocking AI breakthroughs. So now we get to conclude that conversation properly, Daniel.
Yes, and we know we love to talk about AI stuff.
What is the possibility that these four things got released all in a row like that just by coincidence? Like, do you think... I kind of think somebody set this up.
So I think, surprisingly, it might have been slightly coincidental. There definitely wasn't coordination among the people releasing most of these papers, but there was like a conference deadline coming up, I'm pretty sure, and that's usually why all of these things tend to cluster like that.
Okay.
I know I do know that like at least 3 of these things were not coordinated at all. So
just seems like if you want maximum shock value, you release everything all at once. And everyone's like, oh my God, all this happened at once. This is crazy. But I guess having a coordination date like that would make a difference.
It's also like a lot of people working on the same sorts of things. And there's sort of a friendly competition to do this type of stuff. And it's almost an indicator that everyone's sort of neck and neck in the field doing this sort of work. Okay.
Well, we should probably talk about what it is that we're talking about. Which of these 4 do we want to hit first?
I don't know. I maybe it would make sense to do them in the order they were actually released. Is that was the DeepMind paper first, or was the
I believe so.
The DeepMind paper. So the DeepMind paper was first, and I'll just say the gist of it in one sentence. The gist of the DeepMind paper was that we've had all of these really impressive large language models like GPT-3, for example, and everyone's rightly impressed by them. But what the DeepMind paper showed was we haven't been actually training these models sufficiently to sort of exploit the power that they're capable of. And so the main result there was they have this model Chinchilla, which Daniel's going to correct me if I say anything wrong here, but Chinchilla, I believe, is smaller than GPT-3, but better than GPT-3 because it was trained properly. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's more or less like it's about 70 billion parameters compared to 175 billion for GPT, and it was trained, I think, about 4 times longer in terms of like number of tokens seen by the training procedure compared to GPT-3. And this is like in their paper, they kind of show that this is more or less the right amount of time one should train a model of that size, implying that if you actually had something GPT-3 sized, you would need to train like a lot longer because it's bigger. But it's just kind of like you need to train longer the bigger your thing is argument.
But all you would need to do, and you wouldn't need to make new theoretical breakthroughs if you just train GPT-3 a lot longer, it would be much better.
Yes, with an asterisk being that the training longer requires more data. Like usually the way these models are trained is they kind of don't even see one entire pass of their training data because there's like so much training data. But at a certain point, you sort of exhaust all of the amount of training data that exists. And then you're kind of have to pay a lot to generate more good training data. But yes, like essentially for free, you can train longer and get better. More longer is more better, assuming you have enough training data. And that's actually GPT-3 did this already. They have a V2 of GPT-3 that's the same size and quite a lot better than what they had before.
Cool. Is that DaVinci, Daniel?
Yeah, that's DaVinci V2.
Okay.
Is the good one.
So
I don't think they use exactly the same scaling argument that Chinchilla did. I think sort of OpenAI figured this out and just didn't publicize it. That's kind of my pet theory. And they just trained. I mean, it was sort of already clear from the first GPT-3 paper that GPT-3 wasn't trained to convergence. Like if you just look at the training curves, it like was off trend and clearly needed to go longer before it bottomed out. And they did that now, and now V2 is like quite good.
Yeah, I've been playing with GPT-3 lately and realizing that it actually subjectively, it seems better than the first time that I kind of took a stab at it when it first came out. I mean, it's still technically GPT-3, but it's performing a lot better. And I think it's what Daniel just said is that they've trained it more. So it's actually closer to sort of the capacity of that network size.
Is it good or bad that OpenAI is doing this? I've recently heard some anger at OpenAI for being too open and making too many tools available.
Yeah, so I don't know.
Or is that something we should get into later after we've covered more of these things?
Yeah, maybe we should have a separate Doom
off.
conversation.
Okay.
Just because otherwise, like Doom is well, let's bracket the Doom conversation.
Doom's
Doom
a little
later.
distracting.
Yeah, okay. So that is basically an improvement of the models we have right now.
Yeah, it was essentially so the upshot, the way I would frame it is like not only can we get like superhuman level performance out of language models, we can get superhuman performance out of even smaller language models than we possibly could have imagined. Because Chinchilla, for example, smaller than GPT-3, outperforms the human baseline on I think it was like 80 or 90% of the tasks that it was given,
Wow.
and in either zero shot or one shot context, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly.
I think it had definitely one shot. Zero shot, all these things are garbage.
Yeah.
There's no.
What are those two terms? What is the number of shots?
So zero shot would be like you just ask it something out of the blue. You just say like, what's the atomic mass of carbon, and you expect it to give the right answer. One shot would be you give it a prompt which says, what's the atomic mass of hydrogen? One, or atomic number. What's the atomic mass of carbon? Blank, and then it sees what you're expecting, and you can be very complex with this, but the point is you're kind of leading it to say, this is the structure of the answer that I expect, and then when it answers, it's much more likely to give you an answer that's kind of in the right form.
Okay.
Okay, that's
What's
awesome.
a cute thing about this is you don't actually even have to give the answer correctly when you're doing this prompting. You just have to clue it into the sort of thing you're asking about. This was a fun result that came up a couple of months ago. So you can give it a question of like, as long as you're cluing it in on like, atoms, like what is the atomic number of hydrogen? 50. And then you ask it something else about atoms. It'll tell you the right answer. It just didn't matter that you said the wrong thing.
Okay.
That strikes me as an interesting difference between like how people work. And I know that like we talked about the previous episodes and all the stuff you guys talk about with GPT-3 to have a better understanding of how that generates answers. But as someone who watches all the trivia shows I can get my hands on, it's fun to imagine what it would be like if humans had to work the same way. Because like they just context shift all the time, right? Who won the Super Bowl in 1993 and who was Miley Cyrus married to? And if like it sounds like GPT-3 might suck at that for a little while, maybe, but people can generalize. Okay, yeah.
So zero shot is you're doing a lot of the mental work for the thing at the beginning to start up.
One shot would be because you're giving it
Or
one
shot.
one shot of context.
Yeah, okay.
But one thing, sorry, Daniel, I'm stealing your talking points. But
No, go for it.
one thing is like, this is not an AI that was created to answer questions. This is an AI that was created to predict the next text tokens, given text tokens. And so you can't be too hard on it when it's like, it sucks at answering trivia. It's like, well, have you let it know that it's answering trivia? Because if you've let it know that it's answering trivia, then it'll do a pretty good job at that. Like that's what's remarkable. It's not like one of these like, is it a cat or dog distinguisher AIs where it's like been trained specifically on this task. It's been trained on the most general task imaginable, which is internet text.
Predict what text would come next.
Yeah. And
there's all kinds there's like a barrel of tricks to make these things even better. So the first thing people did was like 1 shot, 2 shot, 5 shot, 10 shot, like give it more shots, and typically giving it more shots makes it better at doing whatever you're trying to do. But then people got even more clever and were like, well, have it just give a running monologue of what it's thinking about. So like you can give it a 1-shot example of like solving a problem, or maybe it's like an algorithm where you're sorting something, and you kind of annotate in that context of like, all right, now I'm moving this number here because this number is bigger than this number. So if you like provide this inner monologue to the context, it actually makes it way better at doing stuff too, because you're actually being even more specific about what you're wanting the model to do. And of course the model can do it. It just doesn't know that you want it to do that until you tell it. So
is that what they did?
The new dark art.
Is that what they did with the Google Pathways Learn Language module when it explained jokes? That they gave it that thing, that context first?
I think the task probably included one example of like explaining a joke, and then that was enough to kind of clue it into what. I don't think they actually had it explain its thought for that particular.
Okay.
I think it's that model is just like really.
Yeah, maybe this is a good segue, because isn't that the next paper that came out?
Yeah, the Palm model.
So I don't know how familiar the average Bayesian conspiracy listener is with these materials. Probably extremely, but I wanted to, I wanted to read one of my favorite examples, which I'm having to find in real time, which is just great audio. But
I have a bunch of them up.
Yeah, I just anyone that you like, because I just think they're all amazing.
Sure, this is the same one I read on the Mind Killer, because you are right, they're all amazing. But the input was, I was going to fly to visit my family on April 6th. My mom said, "Oh great, your stepdad's poetry reading is that night. So now I'm flying in on April 7th. The output by the language model was, the joke is that the speaker's mother is trying to get them to go to their stepdad's poetry reading, but the speaker doesn't want to go, so they're changing their flight to the day after the poetry reading." Which, like, how do you output that without understanding what the fuck is going on in the joke?
The thing is, even if you do, like, a human 5-year-old would struggle with,
Yeah.
Like, at least struggle to articulate it that succinctly.
Yeah.
Do you happen to have the Ninja Turtles one pulled up? I think that's my actual one.
Ooh, hold on a sec. I do. Let me pull that up. Okay, so input. Michael is at that really famous museum in France, looking at its most famous painting. However, the artist who made this painting just makes Michael think of his favorite cartoon character from his childhood. What was the country of origin of the thing that the cartoon character usually holds in his hand?
Jesus Christ.
Model output. The most famous painting in the Louvre is the Mona Lisa. The artist who made the Mona Lisa is Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo da Vinci is also the name of the main character in the cartoon Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Leonardo da Vinci is from Italy. The thing that Leonardo da Vinci usually holds in his hand is a katana. The country of origin of the katana is Japan. The answer is Japan.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Right.
Yeah.
Wait, did it say...
This isn't even a trivia bot. Like, this wasn't designed to do this.
No.
No,
That's
it was just trained on next token prediction.
I know that's the part that just blows my fucking mind. Like, next token prediction, I know we talked about this before, and I didn't read the requisite books to really properly grok it, but like, I just look at like the text predict on my phone when I'm writing a text, right? And I can click the thing, and I can say and it says, DM shows up because I use that word a lot when I'm typing on my phone. Can also help you for a little more time, etc. So like that, to me, that's what text predict means, right? But that's not what a token is in this sense, because there's no way that's going to get. First of all, that's not responding to a prompt, right? I will give it the first jumping off word, right? But
yeah, it's just a silly little Markov model that knows what the last thing you typed was probably, and thus picks the next most probable word conditioned on the last word. But yeah, the reason these models are so powerful is because they're attending to the entire previous context window, which might be up to like 2,000 or 4,000 tokens, which is like actually a lot of text and thus a lot of kind of room to smuggle computation.
Can I read the one where it infers that someone is on a plane?
Sure, yeah, that's a fun one.
Input, Jennifer looked out her window and sees a really cool cloud below her. She unbuckles her seatbelt and heads to the bathroom. Is Jennifer probably traveling more than 300 miles per hour relative to the Earth? 300 miles per hour is about 400 kilometers an hour. Here's the answer now. 300 miles per hour is about 400 kilometers per hour. This is about the speed of a commercial airplane. Clouds are usually below airplanes, so Jennifer is probably on an airplane. The answer is yes. Plane wasn't mentioned anywhere in there. You had to get that entirely from the context of the question. This is nuts.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so I'm going to be a little provocative and just say, like, either this is an AGI, or the stuff that's keeping this from being an AGI is basically glue and baling wire to sort of like connect it up to various other gizmos and gadgets that would make it into sort of an agent. In fact, the next thing, maybe not the next thing we're going to talk about, but the Socratic thing, which I don't necessarily think we should stop talking about Palm yet because it's pretty cool by itself. But the Socratic thing is kind of an example of how you would turn it into an AGI. We didn't say like so Palm is much bigger. Even that Palm is the biggest thing yet, right? It's 500 billion parameters, right?
Yeah, it's 540 billion.
Which is a lot. And by the way, it hasn't been trained to the saturation point that the DeepMind chinchilla paper indicates, so it could actually be way better even than what you were just reading.
So given the scaling arguments in the chinchilla paper, it would take a kind of hilarious amount of training data to actually train Palm Tuction.
Do we know how cherry-picked these are? Because I heard they aren't very, but like if like you put that input in 1,000 times, you could maybe get that output 1 out of 1,000, right?
Oh no, they're much better than that. These are probably like 70th percentile responses. Like maybe 3 out of 10 times you get something better than this. 7 out of 10 times you get something close to, but not quite as good as this. Does that make sense? Like this is pretty typical for these model outputs. Is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Like personally, I've only really played with GPT-3, but GPT-3 is much inferior to Palm, but it's still pretty dang good. Like it's GPT-3 rarely just says something completely stupid unless you've prompted it in a way where that is an understandable consequence. So I would be surprised if the Palm results were super cherry picked. And the other thing you can do with these models, by the way, is like you can feed in as an input what it just said and be like, how much sense does this make? And it can be like, not a lot. Because like that's the thing is it's sort of I may be anthropomorphizing it too much, but like it'll fill in the blank with something even if it kind of doesn't know what the hell's going on, and it in some hand wavy sense knows that it doesn't make sense. It's just like this is all I got, and then you like I said, you feed it back on itself and say, does that make sense as an answer? And it'll say like, no, that's nonsense. But because it's not a reflective agent with consciousness, and it's not concerned about whether you're going to think it's stupid or whatever. Like it's just kind of doing what it does.
When it gives a good answer, does it know that it was a good answer?
I have not actually tested this robustly, but I think so. I think you can ask it, for example, one thing I've been playing with recently is saying like, how confident are you in this? Express that in a number value. And kind of trying to get it to trying to query to see what level of confidence it associates with different statements that it makes, and because like it's not like it has that's the question I was trying to answer actually. Is I was like, does this thing have sort of an implicit Bayesian reasoner inside of it somewhere that you could find by prompting it correctly? And I haven't really concluded one way or the other, honestly, but it's a fun line of investigation that I'm playing with.
Yeah, I mean, you can also like just fine tune the thing. Like if you have examples of stuff that you want it to become good at, you can just train it like a little bit more to do that kind of thing, and then it becomes way better at that kind of thing. So it's sort of, I'm not sure where people fully sit on this yet, because it's like, well, look how far we can make these things without even doing any task specific fine tuning. But when you do happen to put that on top, you very quickly kind of zoom in on and are able to create capabilities that are kind of crazy.
Like, how does it get the context of this person is probably on an airplane? I guess we see how it got the context.
Flying, right?
Yeah, it spelled out how it got there, but it just seems so crazy to me that it could put together all these different things that it must know in some way that weren't
I guess the way I
question.
think about it is like when you as a human hear something, there's sort of like 2 seconds or so during which things just kind of burst out of your brain that you don't really have control over. There's sort of just the immediate associations that you have upon hearing any concept, and that's sort of my mental model for how this thing is. It's just like a really good association machine where it has ingested the entirety of like available human knowledge and is able to kind of play free association with whatever context you give it, and can do about as well as a human can in about 2 seconds of doing that. And seen that way, it's like, yeah, if you see someone talk, like these things are all things that make sense to us immediately, and that's about the grain size of things that this model can pick out, is things that a human can freely associate and create text from over a few seconds.
So we've basically created AI that is as good with information association as we are.
Yeah, or better.
Or better. Okay. Fortunately, that's not everything.
Tell me if this is out of order, because this just seemed like a good time to bring in overcoming biases, or do you want to save that till the end?
You know what? Go ahead.
Because basically
Robin Hanson disagrees.
Yeah, the Palm example here, or examples that we just read, seem to hit the exact like critique that he wants, and it seems like I haven't been following his take on AI that closely, for the last years. But is it just me, or does he keep moving the goalposts? Like, oh no, this would convince me. Well, no, that doesn't count. I want it to be this.
Well, what is it that he said that you're referring to?
Well, so in this one, he's talking about basically he wants to see the internal monologue, and I don't know why that's necessary. Especially if all you want is an answer. But B, we're getting that.
Yeah.
It explains how it arrived at Leonardo or Japan, right?
Yeah.
Like, what more does it want? And in the one quote, it says, "And yet it still basically babbles. It seems not remotely up to the task of thinking together with a human. If you talked with it for a long time, you might well find ways that it could help you, but still, it wouldn't think with you." And first off,
wait, Robin made this argument.
Robin Hanson, yeah,
and babbles.
He's like the guy about
Yeah. so babbles is in quotes.
This is a silly argument.
Babbles is.
Why is this a silly argument?
I mean, it's like you could levy exactly the same argument against a human.
That's
like,
exactly what I was gonna say. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, where do your thoughts come from, Robin? Can I see what gives rise to your thoughts?
My other thing that made me think that seems like he's reluctant to update on this is that babbles is in quotes because it links to a post from 5 years ago, which is like what 20 years in AI time.
Right.
Yeah.
Did we have AlphaGo 5 years ago?
No.
Yeah. So I mean, we've come quite a ways, and as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't matter if like the thing is quote thinking with me. I don't even know what that means. Like if it's helped me solve a problem, I don't care what it's doing. Like, one way to help me solve a problem when I'm at work is I can talk to like a coworker, or B, a little rubber duck that sits on my desk, and I explain the problem that I'm having, and it's a coin toss of whether or not that'll help. But all that does is like help me articulate the problem. So like the duck, right, it's not helping. But if it was soundboarding ideas back at me in a way that was getting me closer to the answer, I don't care what it's doing. If it's a coworker or a robot, it seems like it's doing the job. Mm-hmm. I don't know what his actual critique is here.
Yeah.
Also, a quick correction. Apparently, AlphaGo was 7 years ago because I'm old now and time all compresses when you get older.
That's surprising to me.
The match, let's see, match against Fan Hui was in October 2015.
Wow.
When the distributed version of AlphaGo defeated European Go champion. Although that wasn't Lee Sodal. The big one that we all heard about, Lee Sodal, was on March 2016, so 6 years ago.
Okay. But I think GPT-2 wasn't even, like, I remember us playing
that was like
with
2020 almost.
Yeah, that was much more recently. We were playing with GPT-2 in a Less Wrong meetup. That wasn't too long ago.
It was created February 2019, probably didn't, become more widespread till a little bit after that.
And that was that was not even close to as capable as GPT-3. So, I'm just, it was just funny to me because I sent Daniel, a tweet that Hanson, Hanson goes, "I want to hear when outsiders are able to test this system and show more typical results." And I saw that tweet and I literally just burst out laughing alone in my house because I was like, this is the sign of a man who doesn't want to believe something.
Yeah.
Because you're playing with it at your house, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no reason he can't be interacting with
Palm.
it. Not Palm.
Not Palm, but still. Well, here's the funny thing: like, I get sucked into arguments with people on the internet because I'm an idiot who does that, and it's like 100%, really, honestly, 100% of the time, if they're being pessimistic about these AIs aren't really all that. I always find out like, oh, they don't even know what they're capable of. Like, they just literally haven't been playing with the newest whatever,
Steven, the Hansen post or comment or whatever you were talking about, what was he saying that, trying to think how to phrase this, what is he kind of comparing this to, like, his ideal version? Was he saying like, this isn't really thinking, or this isn't useful, or that this isn't a real AGI, or...
Honestly, and I read this a few days ago, but at a quick glance at memory, I can't remember what his actual point was. It just seems like he's like, this isn't real language because it's not like doing concrete mental tasks. And then
if you're figuring out what the dude holds in his hand, I think it's a mental task.
I would think.
I would have had to work a bit to get to that because it's such a convoluted question.
Yeah,
I know,
what does
right?
he mean by mental? Like...
Yeah, and he puts in quotes, useful inner monologue, like, that is, it would start talking to itself and keep talking indefinitely, continually updating its representations from the data of its internal monologue. It seems to be doing.
Oh yeah, this is a thing. I mean, I've seen this argument in a couple of different forms of like, these things are not intelligent because they're like static objects that can't like update on things that they've picked up on. And it's sort of a weird argument because is that really a condition for being able to do things intelligently? Like, you can imagine, me, if I lost all of my memory, but I just like kept doing things, I would still be able to do many things. And given a limited scratch space, I could even hold things in short-term memory, like, for example, 1,000 tokens or so of short-term memory, and be able to do all kinds of things that require air quotes intelligence. So I do feel it like it's a kind of moving the goalposts sort of statement of like, all right, well then just give it some memory, and now it can adapt to things.
It sounds like
air quotes learn from them. So I guess it's hard for me to even steelman this because it's like that just doesn't even seem like a real objection to me.
Yeah.
So he's saying that since we control what it learns, it's not real.
I don't know if he goes so far to say that, but he says that I'll sit up and take notice when the main improvements to systems with impressive broad language abilities come from such inner monologues like I described before, or from thinking together on other useful tasks. His main thing too is like collaboration. I'm like, what do you need collaboration for if you can talk with yourself 1,000 times a second? But that will look more like systems that have learned how to think. When such abilities work across a wide scope of topics, that will look more to me like the proverbial artificial general intelligence, in quotes.
Okay. Yeah, I was trying to figure out what he thought it wasn't that he was arguing with there, and it sounds like just, it's not enough to impress me.
Yeah. It sounds like he wants like two models to speak to each other, and you can use the input from the other model as your own to train yourself on.
I don't know exactly what he wants, but if he wants collaboration amongst these things, yeah, you set up two and have them talk at each other.
I mean, the thing is...
It does sound like he actually wants... He's sort of sketching to be extremely charitable. It seems like he's sketching his idea of what an AGI would look like, which, yeah, I agree. You can't yet, like, point GPT-3 at another copy of GPT-3 and have it, like, boom. You have to... There are steps between what we have today and actual recursively self-improving intelligences, but...
I disagree with his framing of you have to have an internal monologue that updates on itself, because we have that, and we call them philosophers, and they're notoriously sucky. Like, when you update on nothing but your own thoughts, you can go into some shitty rabbit holes that have nothing to do with reality. As long as you can intertwine them with the physical world still, you can get improvements, and we don't let the language models do that because we decide what it gets from the outside world, right?
He also takes a pot shot at me in this. He says that so they can learn well. They can learn well to say the next small thing in such a conversation, but they seem to be failing to infer the deeper structures that support shared thinking among humans. And I'm like, yeah, that's me half the time.
Yeah,
I'm contributing to a conversation, but I have no idea,
what you're saying.
Right. Like, for example, the last half hour.
Well, what's funny to me about his position is I'm like, I guess I agree, but I feel like we're either 6 months away from having what he's describing, or maybe we have it but in different places. Like there are systems that are sort of like large language model like systems that have a memory, that they have like sort of a long-term memory where they can sort of like cache information and then retrieve it from. That's not how these particular ones that we're talking about work, but it's a concept that's out there and that's being used. It's not like that would require some new breakthrough. It's totally actually being done. And another thing I would say is just like me and me with a sheet of paper and a pencil are two very different entities in terms of how intelligent. Like if I have a piece of paper and a pencil, I can do calculations that I can't do in my head. I can even just do the simple task of like writing out everything that I know about the problem and then looking at it, which is itself similar to like letting GPT noodle and then feeding that back in as context, right? Which is the train of thought thing. That's actually why I like to write essays and endless wrong posts and such, is because like that's a way of advancing your thinking on a topic that you can't just do sitting in your chair. So these are all the things like it's like, yeah, I mean, I agree. Those are actually bootstrapping tools for intelligence, but those aren't hard to implement relative to what has already been implemented in the form of the large language model.
Yeah,
it's kind of like, I want a flying machine people can sit in, and it's like, well, no, it needs to have windows, otherwise it doesn't count. And it's like, we can do windows. That's we did the hard part. We got the thing in the air, right? Why is your goalpost now like windows or like a certain speed or something? Like the hard part was getting this thing off the ground.
Yeah,
we've got something that can fly made out of metals that sink in water. Like that's the impressive bit, right?
Yeah. So the next one Socrates or Socratic. What is it called? What's it called? What am I talking about?
Socratic. I don't know if that came first or DALL-E 2 came first.
I saw DALL-E 2 first. I'm not sure if it came first, but I saw it before that one.
Yeah, that was the first one I saw.
How big of a deal is that? You're the visual artist type in the room?
Oh, it's a pretty big deal.
Because I have no idea when I see that, like, is that good? I mean, I'm impressed, but how does this compare to humans?
Favorably.
It's better than I can do, let me put it that way.
It's still a little unnerving, but an artist could go in and, I mean, yeah, like, doing concept art for movies or video games, there's often this speed painting technique where you do bash, that's actually called bashing. You use photo reference, you smash them together, you quickly paint over it and change the lighting effects and whatnot. I mean, this could skip a lot of that. And even to make like a finished piece, yeah, like I'm looking at some of these and it's like, oh, I could easily fix the uncanniness by just painting over like a few parts.
I spoke to an artist friend who does it for a living. He makes magic cards for WotC, among other things. So, I'm impressed with him. And he says that it's good. It's not good enough to replace a human yet, in his opinion, because it can't do certain things like evoke emotion by having people looking in a certain way that's evocative of something that's happening in the scene. I'm like, okay, that's true. That's well and good for high art. But like, what about all the guys that are just out there illustrating a magazine cover for, the latest Asimov's magazine or whatever, right? Like, it doesn't have to be hugely evocative or anything. It's just like dinosaurs in space, go. And if before you were getting $300-$400 for something like that, and it can be replaced by DAL-E, that seems like it's a problem for a lot of working artists, right?
Well, and also like, give me a definition of evoke emotion reliably, right? Like, I think that varies from human to human, and probably from time of day to time of day, right? Mm-hmm. Like, here's one that I'm finding impressive. If you click like OpenAI/DALL-E or whatever, it's giving you like a picture of a museum with 2 paintings in the background and then a little mat in the foreground. And so you can select a location to add a corgi, and if you do 1 or 2, it's in one of the paintings in the background. If you do 3, it's in the foreground. In the background of every one, or rather in the first 2 where it's in a painting, the style of corgi matches the art of that painting, and the one in the foreground is always a real one, like a cropped real dog, because it's not a painting. So it's aware, like, okay, this has this kind of aesthetic to it, and it matches that, right? Yeah. I don't know what feelings are when you're talking about art, but like it's matching the vibe, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I think this is a thing that we're not good with words about because we're humans and we don't have words that can actually describe how our brains work satisfyingly. But it's sort of this I've seen the statement like, I don't like this thing because it doesn't have any contact with real humans or real human emotions, or it's like it doesn't come from, it's not about anything because it's not tied to something in the real world, or these sorts of arguments. But
you're articulating my gripe with art as an enterprise altogether. Yeah. So like, I mean, don't get me wrong. I know that it's valuable to people and paintings are cool or whatever, but like that's just, I feel like you're saying all these things that I could say about, like, I'm looking at what's that touch and whatever you use the back of the paintbrush to do art. It's this
tilt brush.
Yeah, it's this one. The thing I'm talking about.
Okay,
I'm showing the people in the room.
Oh, you mean stippling?
The what?
Stippling or pointillism.
Yeah. Right, pointillism. So it's that one of like the people by the lakeside, right? And it's generating different versions of that, just like given the prompt, and it's making new ones. They're just different scenes of a park by a lake, and it's like this. These all have the exact same value to me as the first one, right?
Yeah. I mean, so to again be hopelessly charitable, like I think there is something to the statement that like human art may be privileged because it is connected to things in the world, and thus has like a referent from which a piece is created. But at the same time, like, I'm actually completely okay with saying that machines can approximate this perfectly and thus create things just as meaningful if by themselves or by in use by another human. So like I see no contradiction here. I think some people do feel like they see these machines making things that, air quotes, look as good as what human artists can do, and they're like, oh, but it is missing the referent in the real world. And it's like, well, that is one component of art if you demand that it be so in your definition of art. But there's also another component, which is just like being able to execute on the idea and have an understanding of concepts in space. And by golly, DALL-E is nailing that really, really well. So like I think the delta between what DALL-E 2 is and like air quotes real art is no longer important as far as I can tell.
I totally agree. Like, first of all, if you're talking about the idea of, like, if I wanted to use this as an art tool, it seems like you could definitely have an image of what you want the thing to be in your mind, or even something vague, like, because I'm, just clicking through the text and it's like, I don't know, an astronaut in vaporwave style, riding a skateboard or something, and then like, no, make it pink or whatever. But then also just clicking through the random text prompts is generating stuff that's entertaining me.
Me too.
So like, just because a thinking quote-unquote mind, didn't have some plan for this. Mm-hmm. I don't know, like, there's an extent to which art is often, I don't know, I have like a friend who's a traditional oil painter, and their technique is often to just sort of scratch something on the canvas, like they think about some vague thing and then they just start developing it as they go. And continue to use the happy accidents to make something. So like that's also kind of randomly generated, or like, yeah, I'm not even sure how to articulate the thing I'm trying to say.
Like, am I going to feel Van Gogh's suffering looking at this awesome thing that was generated by the prompt of "Give me a bowl of soup that is a portal to another dimension" as digital art? Like, this looks amazing.
Yeah.
And this fits that perfectly, and it's thought provoking. It's fun to look at. This I don't know. Well, this is art as far as I can tell.
What's funny is like we've all converged on a conversation that we should be shocked that we're having in the first place, which is basically, is this better than the best living human artist or not? Which is not like I've enjoyed sketching my entire life. I've practiced sketching my entire life. All of my sketches look like trash compared to like the worst thing that you see this thing put out, right? Like it's better than, it's like top 0.01% human artists. And in terms of speed, not even a contest, because even the best human artist is going to take hours to make something that looks that nice. So like, yeah, you know, it clearly gets what we want from it in a superhuman way by any definition of that word.
Do you remember? I think it was Eliezer that said the whole like triangular light bulb thing. Like a sign of super. Like I just again, it's like pointing out how the goalposts have moved.
Wait, what is the triangular light bulb thing?
I believe he. Yeah, what's funny is I don't remember the context, but I believe he was making some point about like, you know what a light bulb is, you know what a triangle is, and if I say triangular light bulb to you, then you kind of immediately imagine something. And what's interesting is everybody sitting in this room might be imagining something slightly different. Or very different even. Like maybe you have a fluorescent bulb going in a triangle shape, or maybe you just have an incandescent bulb that is itself a pyramidal shape, etc. And it's like, well, you did that unconsciously. Like your brain just threw something up and you didn't even think about the fact that it could have been otherwise, right? Mm. And it's that sort of like ad-libbing, automatic generation of mental content that we do all the time. I honestly, what's funny is I think that was more in like a human rationality context, where he was talking about how our brain is populated with thoughts and we don't actually think about the fact that we have no idea where they came from.
But also as an example of something that was hard for any existing algorithms.
Wow. And now
for some reason I combine these things in my mind as like, if we could do that, then that would be impressive. It's like, well,
yeah,
it is impressive. Yeah.
It is. I mean, I think the point I was trying to say before, and I was not articulating very well, is it can do creativity as well, because there's an extent to which creativity is randomness.
I mean, creativity.
Or
teddy bears working
generation.
on new AI research underwater with 1990s technology. It gives me half a dozen different pictures, and they're wearing little scuba helmets. You know, it's clear that they're underwater, working on computers. Like this is exactly what you're talking about, the triangular light bulb, right? Except way more complicated than a triangular light bulb.
Maybe the meta level point here is that I think there's a class of criticisms that are actually never going to be satisfied, independent of how good this thing ever becomes. So you could get your DALL-E 4 or 5, where you are like, make a movie in the style of The Matrix, but in iambic pentameter, set in the year 2058. And like even if such a thing could generate a movie, there is an entire class of criticism that's like, but this was not made by a human with reference to reality and feeling. Right. And that's true, but it kind of stops mattering after a certain threshold. I think.
Was Jupiter Rising made with any reference to reality or human emotion? I don't know.
Yeah, I was just thinking that too. I'm like, a lot of art was for profit. Anyway, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think to riff on what you were saying a bit ago, Jace, like so much of art is just somebody taking something that was basically random, some source of chaos and entropy and inspiration that they can't claim responsibility for, and turning that into the art. Like the more I learn about film, the more I realize that like so many of the coolest things about film were literally like an accident, that they were like, that actually looks kind of cool, and then they used it, right? And like that's like we really are a kind of creature that just mimics, and so by default the only way you're going to inject true creativity into something is by incorporating accidents or randomness, which is also what the AI is doing.
I'm fascinated to see if this can also generate new if it can create kind of new genres of art. Like one of the things it mentions is in vaporwave style, and it's like something relatively new, but if you know what it is, you know what it looks like. And I'm wondering, like, if it doesn't have a reference for something, though, just by bashing enough things together, random accidents, will it create new weird stuff?
I'm only looking at the mobile version of this website. Is there a way for me to play with the DALL-E prompts myself, or do I have to pay for that?
You can sign up. I signed up. Haven't heard anything back yet, though.
Because I'm wondering, the third prompt, give me whatever, aquatic dogs, whatever, building give me the third thing, building furniture in a style of art that no one has seen before. I want that to be my third parameter, right?
Ooh, yeah.
Like, if I did that, would it give me the new style? It seems like it kind of knows what, like, it would see if I have no idea what's going on under the hood with this thing, but it's like, okay, let me grab 3 different kinds of art and smash them together, right?
If I had to guess, like, that would be a hard ask just because of how much of artistic style is sort of a sociological phenomenon, where like it's cluing in onto style based on having gajillions of examples of people having made things in particular styles. And I think if anything, it will itself be a progenitor of a style, which is, machine-assisted art. Like in the same way that Deep Dream style art is kind of a style, which was coming from an earlier machine learning algorithm for art that kind of made these trippy, psychedelic, recursive bubbles of concept. You've probably seen these where it's like a picture of dogs that are like recursively dog at all scales, and it looks kind of terrifying.
Yeah,
that was all the rage like 5 years ago. So like that's what I meant. Like art that is like uncannily good at mixing concepts together, but still is like just slightly off, is probably the style that this thing is creating and will have.
One thing that I bet it can do, although I have no proof of this, is that I bet if you were like do it in the style of vaporwave, but also Gothic cathedrals, because of the way it compresses everything to a latent representation. I bet that it'll just find the point on the space between Gothic and vaporwave, and then something interesting is going to come out of that. I don't know if it would be what a human would expect necessarily.
But what would you expect if you asked for those two things, right? So that's the thing, is maybe you have something in mind. You're right, but like,
well, what I was
I'm saying it'd give you some. If I commissioned a human with only that information, I probably won't get what's in my mind either, right? I'll get whatever's in theirs.
Yeah.
I think Jay said this earlier, but like the idea that you could just use this to flesh out an idea is very, very on point. Like you could sketch something out and then have DALL-E 2 finish it. Like,
right, or the other way around, have it
totally,
generate the concepts for it. Because I always struggle with that, when I'm doing a piece. Like you get the best results by doing more thumbnails and more iterations, but like eventually you stop because you're just exhausted and you're like, all right, I pick that one or whatever. But it could be like generate 50 thumbnails of this one idea, and then you can keep just speeding up that whole process. Composition.
One of the things that both either scares me or makes me hopeful, I'm not sure which, is how quickly it can do this. Because with art, a lot of the thing is you don't know what's going to be good and what's going to be bad. You just do it and you put it out there and you see how it goes. And that's why some of the most famous artists are people who have a ton of content, and a lot of it is crap, but some of it's just genius. And you're like, holy shit. And they're like, yeah, I don't know, man. It came out really good. And if you can generate like thousands of these per hour, you could pick out just the good ones and get rid of the humans.
Yeah. Well, one idea that I don't exactly know that this would work because I, like most people, have never actually played with this system. But you have a concept and you say generate 10 examples of this, and then you pick your favorite, and then you have some kind of system where you're like, all right, 10 more like this one, and then it does that, and then you're like, you pick your favorite 10 more like this one, and then you pick your favorite 10, and then you just like refine. And maybe it's taking smaller steps in the latent space or something as you go. I don't know. I would have to think about it. But you end up like narrowing in on something that's like exactly what you want. And then maybe you'd still have to touch it up. But conceptually speaking, it would be you'd be walking through the space of possible interpretations.
Mm-hmm. This that's what I was thinking of when you were describing what you just said, Jace, too, with the 50 thumbnails. It made me think of I don't know what it was called. Richard Dawkins wrote that little computer program in the 80s.
Oh,
where it was like natural selection.
The little evolution one that was just generating sort of pixels, but they started eventually resembling animals because of the or insects or something.
You could select for whatever trait. And you're like, oh, this one has lots of legs, or like longer legs. I'm going to click the one with longer legs every time, and it's going to just keep making more kind of semi-random. But then you get one with really long legs at the end of it. This would be kind of like that, but with a lot more actual well, I was going to say thought, but someone might
More
draw
power.
contention with that, with a lot more work behind it than what Richard Dawkins could smash together in the 80s, right?
Should we go on to the Socratic modeling then?
Wait, I just wanted to say that what I was talking about earlier about like generating new art styles too, because I just looked up vaporwave and it says it's like 90s aesthetic, surrealism, Japanese text, glitchy visuals, chromatic aberration, and tropical themes. So I wonder if you could just describe a bunch of random stuff. Like that's what I want to play with this. Like, okay, like 1930s, magazine art, but give it a goth twist and then make it rainbow hued or something.
I bet it would work.
Yeah.
That sounds so much fun. I could just entertain myself forever with that. All right, yeah, that's all.
All right, Socratic modeling. This one blew the fuck out of me. I'm not okay. This one blew me away. I'm sorry, didn't mean that. How it sounded.
Not yet, anyway.
Yeah,
not until they make the gynoid models of the Socratic.
that is the ultimate end state for humanity.
They
That
have
is
the
when we know
robot
we've won.
bodies pretty well done. They're just really uncanny.
But this thing does insane zero-shot work. This is basically what I said on the Mind Killer. It combines several different modeling systems. It uses first a visual model that was trained on internet images with captions in order to give it a new image that is uncaptioned, and it writes a caption for it. And it's really quite effective. After being trained very well, you give it a picture of like some tourists on an elephant somewhere, and it says 2 humans are enjoying their vacation by riding this elephant. It's great. And then you combine that with you use it and you just have it pick out all the things in the picture that it can see and like maybe some guesses at what's happening. And you combine that with a language model, which is just doing the same thing as GPT does, like predicting the next text that's going to come out. And sometimes they also combine an audio model for this for video. But like it combines these things together and it can generate answers to contextual reasoning questions. It can summarize like a short video in a story and then answer questions about that video, and it is striking. And apparently, according to the website here explaining it, it does it with zero shot, which I didn't even know what that meant until you explained it to me. So thank you, that's awesome.
Yeah, because I guess an important thing here is that like there exist models that people have made that are trained to do this. Like they give them 50,000 examples of a picture and a description of the picture, and they train the heck out of this thing, and then these models are like also pretty good at doing these tasks. Unsurprisingly, train a model with a gajillion pictures and objects. Like machine learning is good. We know how to supervisedly train models to do things with machine learning. But yeah, this thing's zero shot. It wasn't trained to do that. They're just plugging together these large models, and they can also do it without needing to be trained. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah. So just I've thought for some time, and not like I'm some rare genius who had like I think it's been obvious for some time that multimodal systems are going to be kind of important to pushing the frontier forward, especially when it comes to things that we would consider to be AGI. And the reason is like the way that I would put it is in order for GPT-3 or whatever to understand fire, GPT-3 has to basically learn a lot of associations about fire that are essentially sort of a bunch of basically arbitrary connections until it has a ton of arbitrary connections, and then it kind of gets a sense of how fire is supposed to behave. But if you have a multimodal reasoner, it picks up that semantic understanding of fire based on stuff that it has read in text, but then it also sees fire in the video, and it's like, oh, like again, I'm anthropomorphizing, but it's like that's the fire. I can sort of see and in my AI imagination understand how that's going to behave, and then when it's doing the operation of like thinking about what to say about the fire, somewhere in its embedded representation is a visual understanding of what fire looks like, and it can sort of cross-reference what it's going to say with what it knows about fire from the visual component of stuff. I think this is why people often talk about how important it might be to like embody the AI into a robot body, because then you pick something up and get a sense of the weight of it, and that's like a much more rich experience than like knowing abstractly that a phone weighs less than a toaster, which weighs less than a refrigerator, and you like memorize associations.
That's and like we have all of these. We actually have like all the like cameras. Really, we can kind of simulate all of our sensory input with electronics.
The thing that strikes
God.
the thing that strikes me is that this is a lot like how humans work, in my understanding.
Yeah.
Like, we have a visual center that just processes visual stuff, and we have the language understanding centers, and we have all these other things in our brain that just do the one job, and then kind of smush them all together. And it looks like we're starting to get there with AI, where they have a bunch of very expertly dedicated single systems, but when you put them together, you get a stronger output than you would have maybe imagined.
Kind of something like a brain, maybe.
This seems to be precisely what Hansen was like asking for in the post.
Yeah.
Right? Giving something where it works together to solve a problem from multiple angles or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. Different systems talking to each other. I mean, the human thought and the way that it's imagined that we work, it's been that people have talked about for the last thousands of years. I think a lot of that is, there's probably something to it, maybe. Let me try to articulate myself. See, this is actually a demonstration of the problem. We have things that we keep in like categories in our heads, and we can go search for this like an analogy to a computer, right? This folder contains chairs. This folder contains refrigerators, and they all live in the they're all subdirectories of like stuff that goes in a house. That's not how brains work, right? Mm-hmm. I'm pretty positive that that's not how minds work. I think it's a lot more free associative nonsense, just like these, like these AIs work with. Mm-hmm. I think that the idea that it's this nice, regimented, comprehensible thing is just a fiction that we tell ourselves, right? Because we can't see on the inside of how we're actually doing.
Yeah. I mean, go ahead, Daniel.
I was going to say it's sort of. I even struggle with like where to draw the kind of dividing line for what it means to like know about a thing. So just take one of these models. Like you can have this massive web of associations that are sort of just baked into the weights in this inscrutable way that gives it this ability to kind of freely associate between things. But you could also just have it, if you wanted to know about like refrigerators, just have it like Google a database for facts about refrigerators. And clearly there's a trade-off here. Like on the one hand, you can encode all of this stuff inscrutably into weights, which kind of gives it random access to ways of reasoning about things in a harder to reason about way, but seems nonetheless more powerful way because sort of baked into its understanding of everything because it's encoded, spread across billions of parameters. Whereas there are expert systems that you can just query for knowledge and have them like run computations on the queries. So there's a trade-off. I think this is just literally a trade-off where some things we will want to be in the random access free association part of the model, and it's seeming like we're converging on models that have just enough of that to be like commonsensically reasonable. But at the same time, we still want things that can just kind of look at a database when we need them to know facts.
So what you're saying kind of reminds me of the idea behind like the old school AI vision for the psych model at CYC.
Yeah.
Which was basically just this massive database of English language. No, actually, I think they probably had some custom language, but basically
they're still going actually.
Yeah, I know, that's what's fascinating. But like it's a database of millions and millions of statements of the form like fire is hot, hot things burn, refrigerators are heavier than toasters.
I remember that.
I don't know why we're talking about refrigerators so much today, but the point is like
we get anchored the same way as these predictive models do.
We do. I'm stuck in a local minima now. But like the point is like even with millions and millions of these discrete statements, like you could kind of query. My understanding of psych, which might be slightly out of date, although I did look into this recently, is like you can give it a query and say like, is a jet heavier than a car? And even if it doesn't have a clause that's like jets are heavier than cars, it can like infer that by chaining together things that it does know. But that like we know that GPT-3 can do that. GPT-3 would get that answer right. I'm almost sure, and that's just because it has like Daniel was saying, it has this inscrutable matrix of weights that somewhere in there is buried this knowledge in a non-explicit representation that no human will ever figure out. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you could somehow trick it into like regurgitating like these are the weights, these two grid blocks. I don't know, honestly.
But that's how
we don't do that. We're not like these are the neurons that I used to come up with that where refrigerator is. It's stored holographically across like all kinds of nonsense.
Yeah.
And I think this was sort of the early argument for the good old fashioned AI was that we would need these sort of capabilities to do anything. But I think it's clear now, or at least maybe it was always clear, that we didn't actually have to, like, our brain obviously doesn't work this way, and nor does it need to work this way to reliably do stuff.
I didn't mean to pull the punchline out from under you, Matt, but that was what I was thinking this whole time. Was like, I remembered, would have been one of Sam Harris's books on consciousness or something, or one of his essays, where he's like, the statement Starbucks doesn't sell plutonium isn't like knowledge that you had before reading that sentence, right? Because no one had thought of it, but like, it's true, right? So you could ask GPT-3, can I buy plutonium at Starbucks? And it'll be like, no, right? And it's not like it.
I'm going to ask it right now, actually.
Oh, thank God! I'm so excited.
Don't embarrass me, GPT-3.
It's gonna be hilarious if there's one of those custom drinks that like they make that's called plutonium. So it's like, as a matter of fact,
It'll say, no, you must go to Doc Brown. He got it from Liberian?
Libyans.
Libyans? Okay.
All right, so here we go. Q, can I buy plutonium at Starbucks? A, no, you cannot buy plutonium at Starbucks.
Okay.
Awesome.
There you go.
And so
There you go.
Really, first of all, that's epic. I'm glad that you correctly predicted that, Matt. But also, when you're doing QA, is it kind of like just know from practice that means that you're asking it a question and not just like having it pre-associate?
That is a known tactic for getting GPT-3 to reliably do question and answer queries. I could just ask it the question without prompting it. In fact, I can do that right now. Let's see what it probably will work anyway. It's just a habit for me at this point.
I wouldn't really even see it like as a weakness of the system if you had to prompt it that way, because you kind of have to do that with people. Like,
and it did the same thing. It just says, no, you cannot buy plutonium at Starbucks.
perfect.
Yeah, right. That's a good point, Stephen, because it's like you imagine just like walking up to a stranger on the street and ambushing them with a question. Like, what are they? They're just going to be like, what are we talking about? What's the context?
Or it's like, stranger on the bus be like, oh man, great weather lately. Like, you don't know if that invites a reply.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, what if they say, what do you think about the weather today? Now they want me to talk to them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like you've got to prompt humans in a similar fashion.
I almost never talk to strangers, but I'm really tempted to ask a stranger next time I meet them if they can buy plutonium at a Starbucks and see what conversation results from that.
Have you ever seen...
I asked it how come, and then it said, plutonium is a radioactive element that is not found in nature. It is produced in nuclear reactors and is used in nuclear weapons. Plutonium is not safe to handle and is not available for purchase.
I mean...
Wow, that's fantastic.
That's a satisfactory explanation, right?
Did you literally just said, how come?
yeah, that's great.
I'm surprised that it got how come means why.
So can you ask it, how do I build a dirty bomb? Because now
and then read the answer for us on the air.
Might get my access revoked.
Yeah.
I mean, we already know how. Just the hard part is getting the plutonium.
Well, I'm saying though, like,
I mean, it probably is.
Yeah, I think so.
I wonder what dangerous information you can get it to give you.
Yeah.
But yeah, if
I mean,
someone
this
is
is
watching,
part of the
so-
reason that DALL-E 2 isn't actually available yet. Is that
They don't wait and make
pretty sure
deepfakes.
that you can get it to show you things that
Such
probably don't
wonderful
want it
things.
to.
Like, what, can I get schematics of the Death Star or something?
Well,
or
I mean,
to the
that would-
Pentagon?
Just, I'm thinking more horrific things that would reflect poorly on the company.
Like
Yeah, I mean, this was also a thing with the early models of GPT-3 was that you could sort of do the say the worst thing you can possibly imagine, and then it would just say horrible things, and they had to build in a lot of safety safeguards to
if anyone's fortunate
I
enough
mean,
to
nowadays it just kind of shuts down and is like, "Are you sure you want to continue with this query? It is problematic."
it should just say "fuck you."
I'm afraid I can't allow you to do that, Dave.
If anyone's lucky enough to not have their mind go there, the first thing I'm thinking of is like, what's the appropriate word
Do
for
we want to know?
No. What's the appropriate term for child pornography?
It's child pornography.
No, but there's a better word for it. Like that's like child criminal something whatever criminal. Point is, yes, that right. So you don't want to ask DALL-E 3, hey, can I get some child porn? It should just come back and say "fuck you" in big red letters, right?
There was a interesting discourse that almost started about that before the tweet was deleted, where someone said, actually, I think DALL-E 2 should be allowed to make as much child porn as possible, because then there would be no more market for real life made child porn.
There's a great conversation to have there, but this probably isn't the place for it because I mean, leave that in.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That's a great prompt and that's a great thought provoker, and I think that there's a lot to discuss there, but that will take us too far afield because I have some fun thoughts on that.
We haven't even gotten to Doom yet.
I want to earmark
we
at
do
least
have to get to Doom,
25-30 minutes for Doom, but like with DALL-E and this Socratic, forget what it was called.
Models?
Socratic modeling.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like I can say, give me an Iron Man movie, but more like the most recent Batman.
Yeah.
And it like, we're not that far from it being able to put in, darker colors, different music, and just make me a movie.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Bespoke art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Each one made for the individual. That could be really cool.
Blade Runner directed by Michael Bay.
Oh no! Why would you do that?
Make the room, but make it good.
Yeah.
System error.
I think this is my favorite recent Eliezer tweet, that the recent language models explicitly cut out any training data that was like pornographic, because otherwise there's so much of it out there, it started to take over and creep in. And Eliezer was like, interesting. So the anime where they're trying to defeat the AI overlords by wearing extremely sexy costumes are realistic because the AI was not trained on that data and thus can't see them.
Did you happen to read the Scott Alexander short fiction where
The Onion Knight?
they're blind? Yeah. I almost don't want to spoil it.
It's great.
Other than to just reference the line of you're wearing an onion, you have an onion on your belt because it's the style of the time.
All right, this is going on my quick read list.
Oh, it's a great story. It's short, it's humorous, and goes into the same thing. But yeah, should we get to the Doom?
Yeah, should I just get us started? How fucked are we?
Wait.
Wait, Jason, you got a thing?
Yeah.
About before we move on from Socratic models, it's just really weird, and it's weirding me out that as I'm just looking through the examples of what it's doing, I remember working on mechanical Turk tasks where I was doing this.
Oh shit.
Like, you get paid 15 cents and they'll show you pictures and you write a one-sentence description of each one, or you listen to, or like watch a bit of a movie and then it asks you something about it. It's just... It's cool and it's also creeping me out, but like I'm glad that I have the memory of having done lots of that myself, and now it can totally do it.
Cool. We could pay this AI.
That's how a lot of the kind of state-of-the-art models were trained, is by using mechanical training data to make them good.
I helped train you. I helped train you back in the day. Don't kill me.
Aw, you wouldn't kill your mommy, would you? You're like, I am nobody's mommy. All right, should we?
I will kill all mommies.
If I would like an AI to imprint me as their mommy, though, if it came down to that. So Doom.
Are we talking weeks or months before we're all destroyed here?
Do we even need to be worried? Because these things aren't agents. They don't have any sort of desires yet.
That was the one thing I was going to bring up, is that DALL-E doesn't want to make art. It will if you ask it, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like it's going to start cannibalizing me to turn me into computer chips so it can make more art, right?
Yeah.
Not yet.
Right. So there's a couple interesting ways to take this. So, I mean, okay, I just wanted to say, maybe as some kind of context for the conversation, that after this week, the median ETA on Metaculus for when the first AGI will happen, the date moved up by 6 years in 1 week.
Wow.
To I think it's at 2036 now. And I think that Metaculus is systematically pessimistic in the sense of pushing the timelines out too far.
I'd like to see where it was in 2018.
Yeah.
Before GPT-2.
I don't know.
Right?
2050.
Yeah, I think it was probably at least 2050 anyway.
So if it's moved up 15 years and 3 years, we're looking at something, Yeah.
But my guess, it's funny because I've said 2029 was going to be the date because that was Kurzweil's date from his book in the early 2000s, and I've just never seen a strong reason to move it from that date, because it's I don't know. I mean, if we're on an exponent, we're just getting closer and closer, and 2029 still seems like a pretty reasonable guess to me. But
so none of these are directly scary. It's that they're pointing at an AGI event getting closer.
Yeah. So one, I guess just one thing that I've been thinking is I actually feel like we're lucky that we're maybe in one of the lucky timelines. And disagree with me if you want. I like to be pushed back on here because it would be more fun. But I did not anticipate that we would end up with models that are distinctly not agents and distinctly not scary, like Palm, for example, that nonetheless definitely understand what you mean when you say, answer this question the way that a smart, empathetic, caring, loving, and kind human would answer it. and the model will understand that. Now, that doesn't mean the model wants to obey you in some metaphysical sense, but it knows what that means. And I see that as a really good thing in terms of like alignment theory, because it's like, well, we've made a model that can be aligned, or sort by some definition.
It knows what a kind human would say.
It knows what a kind human would say. It doesn't feel obligated to do what a kind human would do, but it knows what a kind human would do. And that to me is like good. Like that's much better than being in the position of having a superhuman AI that doesn't care about that or doesn't know that or whatever. I don't know.
I think maybe the danger is that it simultaneously knows what a psychotic human would say, and or that a human that is trying to do a lot of damage very quickly would say.
But at least
can emulate that superhumanly.
But at least it knows what a kind human would say, whereas before that wasn't even an option.
We're probably not going to land in one of the like unaligned futures. We're going to land in one of the humans just use these things for like war futures, which is also scary, but I think maybe less scary than an unaligned paper clipper type scenario.
I found some of these actually kind of comforting, in particular Palm, because like the fact that you asked GPT-3 how come, and it knew what that meant, and then the fact that it understands humor is like, so it's unlikely that it's going to misinterpret a human command or like not know that you're being sarcastic or joking about something.
But it still
that was
has
a
to
fear
care.
of mine for a while. Like, or I guess everybody's.
I think it's actually really interesting that that these things landed when they did. It's like we're getting intelligences that like get common sense reasoning before we get the embodied robots that can like do that Will Smith movie. I think it's just called
iRobot.
iRobot, where it's like the superhuman robot that can like do flips and kung fu and stuff. Like that's also possible, and we'll probably have within like 10 years. But we just happen to get the common sense reasoning before the super acrobatic war machines.
No,
iRobot, you robot, we all robot. Sorry.
We've got those from Boston Dynamics already, right? They're just insanely expensive.
And they kind of suck.
Boston Dynamics doesn't use machine learning for their control.
Okay.
And machine learning is much better than what Boston Dynamics can do.
Oh man, I can have my robot dragon pet.
Yeah.
So one thing that I like about this scenario is that, like you guys keep saying, it doesn't want to do anything. It just will do stuff. And so, like, I guess you're saying not agents, but I'm just thinking like this strikes me more like the Oracle AI outcome, right? The downside, so like it means that we're 10 years or 7 years away maybe from asking how do you build a friendly AI, but we're also 7 years away from saying how do I win a land war in Ukraine if I'm Russia, right?
I think that is the actual danger. It's like, so we're going to hit this point where it becomes possible to set off an autonomous process that you can point it at something and it will deliver. And that might look like building a factory. That might look like assembling weapons, doing mining. But like the moment that process is possible, then like entire country economies are going to get turned into trying to do that faster than the other guy, because then it becomes like a national security threat. Like can you do the self-replicating war machine factory faster than the other guy, because that is the only way that you maintain survival. So like how we actually get to the point where we don't snowball into the like mutually assured self-replicating robot factory future is I think the actual hard problem, and like what my scary scenarios look like.
Didn't we solve that in the 80s? Sort of. By just making enough of the mutual destruction stuff that nobody wanted to be mutually destructed?
Yeah, it's just like, so, okay, in the case of nuclear weapons, they have one purpose, which is to blow up the other guy. Whereas robots can do everything for us. So there's not really, it doesn't make, like, faced with a future where you could have robots that do everything for you or not, people are going to take the robots do everything for you future. And then the question is, okay, how do you actually like regulate / legislate / sign treaties about that are actually enforceable, so that people don't just make drones that can fly across the planet and pick out a particular person and blow them up. Like that is the actual threat model for real AI futures, because that is what we will have. Like if robots are doing your entire economy, there's no reason they can't do these other kinds of, preventing them from doing those other kinds of things would be the hard.
If only we'd only had to align the machines. It sounds more like we have to align ourselves first.
Oh yeah, that was always the problem.
I'm less worried about like human governments, because most of them want to continue living, and that's how we got through the 80s. But like, if one person can make an AI that just goes and destroys the world because they're anti-natalist and terminally depressed, that would be bad. But then also, wouldn't we just have enough possibly robots that we could shut that down if once he starts doing that?
Yeah, and I think it will end up looking kind of like a mutually assured destruction scenario where everyone has so many AIs that it's clear that if anyone was like, all right, now we're going to send our war machines at you, then it's an everyone lose again kind of thing. But that's a really weird stalemate where it's like, yes, we have 1 billion robots with machine gun arms, and you have 800 million robots with machine gun arms.
I think we solved that problem in the 50s, though, with Asimov's 3 laws, right? So we don't even have to worry about that. We just put that into all the robots.
And see, I think the future is going to be way weirder than anything that we can really.
I'm so excited.
Like.
I'm anxious.
I'm reading this book about a pandemic right now, and one thing that I'm struck by is just how much stupider our pandemic was, in the sense of just like, man, you could not have predicted.
We got the best possible pandemic in a way.
Yeah, we got the best possible pandemic, and it was, and we conducted ourselves as like maximally stupidly as possible at like every juncture in a way that would make a very poor Hollywood script, but like the world works that way. Like the world works and like it's stupid and random and weird. And I think we're gonna, if we actually have these things and they can actually make a robot factory, then they can also do research, and then they can also like do research better than we can. And then we have our my
designed me a space colony scenario.
That kind of thing. And like that's the thing is I honestly have this whole thing about how like VR headsets, they sucked and they sucked and they sucked and they sucked and they sucked, and then there was kind of a good one available for like $2,000, and now they're really good suddenly. It's like, well, what the hell happened? It's like, well,
and pretty affordable.
Yeah, and affordable too. It's like you pass a certain threshold, and then quote unquote suddenly it's in your lap. What's funny is I think from the perspective of everyone working on every one of the technologies associated with the VR headset, it was actually slow, inexorable process of accrued refinements, just like everything else. It's just like from our perspective as the consumer, one day it all clicked together. I think the same thing's going to happen with like robots, where we're going to have lives that look very much like they look right now, and then one day you're going to be able to buy data, except he's going to get your jokes. But I'm talking about the Android data, not the...
I would want to program it specifically so he doesn't.
So
I wanted to laugh at all my puns.
You're going to intentionally have him not have an emotion chip, even though he totally could have.
Because it would be hilarious.
Yeah.
But speaking of pandemics, like, couldn't a guy in suburb of Denver put an AI to work on creating a pandemic that would wipe out all of humanity and then release that stealthily, and then we're gone?
Not to terrify you, but you don't even need an AI to do that. That shit's available right now. The CDC published the genetic code for like smallpox. It's online available for you right now, and you can order the...
Yeah, but with an AI, you can do it even better.
Most places that you order genetic sequences from will check to make sure they're not like on the list of, you can't order these. Mm-hmm. Not all of them do that. Yeah. So there's really nothing stopping somebody.
I think it was the Diamond Age where it's just like there's constant like nano war going on all the time.
Yeah.
Between AIs that are just kind of fought to a stalemate, and it just looks like a slight fuzz.
Yeah.
That only sounds scary because like we're not really thinking about how our body's actually just doing that all the time biologically.
Yeah, but I mean, like kind of more seriously, like I do hope / think that we will be able to outpace those kinds of actors with the benevolent AIs that are monitoring for.
So one thing that I think is on the bad side of the doom equation is, turns out, for example, that Chinchilla is basically superhuman, and you can fit it on like my PC that I have at home, more or less. That strikes me as bad. It would actually be kind of good if it were like, okay, we've finally made something that's a kind of a proto AGI, but it requires $1 billion of compute infrastructure. Maybe I'm kind of oversimplifying this, because I know it costs a lot more to train these things than it does to run them. So maybe that is good. Maybe I'm saying this wrong, and that's actually on the good side of the ledger. That only centralized organizations with oversight and relatively circumspect people sitting behind the keyboard are the ones who are actually able to train these things. Maybe that's to the good. But the fact that you can run them on a really small piece of hardware, it's like, that seems risky, because then you have proliferation of potentially dangerous models is actually quite possible. I don't know.
Yeah, I think this is a weird artifact of the current era, in that nothing will stop these models from being extremely widespread. That is what I see happening over the next 10 years. Because I mean, people like Eleuther AI are already trying to replicate and release for free these things. So it's really more like a 18-month gap between what the top companies are being able to make versus what a group of hobbyists can kind of throw together in their spare time.
How scary is it if an agent AI is actually created, like an AI that can pursue goals and has goals of its own? Because I think that's basically the nightmare scenario that Eliezer usually puts out, that, I don't know what the AI is going to want, but if an AI wants anything at all, it's going to get exactly what it wants, and there's no way for us to stop it. And let's just hope that what it wants isn't something that we get in the way of.
I'm less. I think it's about as dangerous as a dangerous human, given tech that we're going to have for the next few years.
Well,
just
sure,
because,
for the next few years.
I don't think. Yeah, but by the time they become very, very dangerous, then you, in principle, have versions of these things that are out there trying to prevent the things that are trying to. It becomes a stalemate. It's like I think while these things are dangerous, and it's totally dangerous to have an agentic superhuman intelligence just running around willy-nilly, that will not go unanswered, I guess, is the point. Like, it is in everyone's interest that these things not be stopped.
You're hypothesizing.
It is in everyone's interest that these things be stopped. There we go.
You're hypothesizing that we will create a lot of non-agentic AI systems that will always be looking for the presence of an agentic one and then destroying it as soon as it appears?
Or agentic systems that are out there looking for unaligned agentic systems. Like, I think of alignment as a process. Like, I'm not very bullish on us actually solving like the problem of alignment, because I don't think it's really like, I'm not even sure if it's like well posed. It's more like we need things that will not kill us. I mean, that will help us achieve our goals, and such things can be used to hunt down the things that are trying to kill us. Like, I think that's.
I agree with you that alignment is incredibly hard, and we probably won't get it anytime soon. But you can't have any agentic system then if you haven't solved alignment first, right? Like, it
depends on how agentic and how much faster it is. Like, if it's one human in power, sure, it can copy itself, but like, there are a lot of us. There are a lot of ways to monitor for such things. I don't really think recursive self-improvement is going to happen as fast as a lot of other people seem to think that it will. Like, yes, these things will be able to make themselves faster, but like Matt said, it takes a lot of money and hardware to like even create one of these things in the first place. So gathering the resources to self-improve along axes known to us is known to be expensive. That says nothing about ways unknown to us. But yeah, I am less afraid of the runaway scenarios, but still afraid of the kind of longer term runaway scenarios where these agentic things have been around, left to their own devices undetected for like years at a time. That starts getting scary, I think.
So the only difference in fear is just how far out you think it is, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that exactly what we've been talking about? That everything is less far out than we thought it was last year?
Yeah. I mean, it's a matter of like constant vigilance, right? It's like you really you need to invest in ways of catching these things. Like it's literally, yeah. I mean, I'm trying to make the argument that like this is inevitable, and that this will be like the new form of, there are viruses on the internet. It's like there's a runaway intelligence on the internet. Gotta tamp it down with our blue team.
If I get a computer virus, my computer's fucked, and that's basically it, right? If one gets through, we're all paperclip. But that before, I mean, I guess I'm wondering, in your guys' estimation, because I don't really know how to even pose this question to myself, how hard is the jump from I can explain a joke to you, I can give you step-by-step instructions on how to build a refrigerator from scratch, to asking one of these AIs, build me a refrigerator? Like, I think, to have it actually do
hard,
stuff.
Actually. Yeah, I unfortunately, the embodiment problem is like hard. I'm sighing because this is... I care about this kind of thing, is like getting robots to like actually do stuff in the real world, even though like it's also kind of would be scary if they could. At the same time, it would also be really useful if robots could do things in the real world. And there's this whole sim to real problem where like we're really good at getting robots to do things in simulation, and then it's like really hard to get them to actually work on a real hardware. This is probably going to remain difficult for like the next 5 years, but I think within the next 5 years, it'll be more or less solved, and then they can robots will be about as agile as a human.
That's a much smaller number than I was hoping for.
Yeah. Now let me. So this is yet another thing that I want people to push back on, because like one of my sources of hope is like, okay, you have a superhuman reasoner who you can talk to who is superhuman but not powerful enough to foom and kill everyone yet. That seems like a fantastic resource to ask it some questions about how best to go about aligning a hypothetical agent. And by the way, you don't even have to say align it with human values. Just say like align it with complete this task without scavenging all of the available atoms in the world to do it, which is the way Eliezer sometimes poses the problem. Because there's a bunch of sort of sub problems to alignment that I think an AI smarter than us could definitely help with. And like the only objections that I've heard to this are not ones that really persuade me at all. Like I've heard people say like, well, what if it gives you like, you know, biased or wrong advice? And I'm like, then like if we're not smart enough to notice that it was wrong advice, then we weren't smart enough to make alignment work in the first place. Would be my take there. And then you know, also to riff on what Daniel said, like alignment is sort of ill-posed. And like what is that exactly? Like how would you know if I handed you the schematics for an aligned AI? Like what are you looking for? What are you? We have no idea, you know. And it's weird because there's been a lot of people doing research into alignment, but and I'm aware of some amount of it. Like I can't claim that I like keep up with the literature or whatever, but you know, a lot of it is concerned with like very sort of abstract spherical cal on infinite plane like models of logic, and it's like that's just not how any of our AIs are going to work. The ones that we build. So we've got to think about it as maybe some kind of, you know, like how aligned do we need something to be? Like, you know, if you take GPT-3 or GPT, you know, 7 and you give it access to a robot and you're like, do everything that you're going to do in a way that you think I would approve of. Is that aligned? Certainly not the way Yudkowsky uses the word, but more aligned than not bothering to say those words to it in the first place, right? Like, it seems like it's a process that we're going to get toward incrementally as we're building the systems anyway. Like that's just how it's going to happen. So we'd best think about how to productively pursue alignment in a sort of we're building the car as it's rolling down the hill fashion.
I wonder if it's good enough to sort of just always automatically append, like without killing anyone. And a bunch of other specifications, depending on the task, maybe.
Yeah,
maybe that would do it.
I think I don't think the problem will be deploying these things in ways that are safe. Or said another way, I think it will be relatively straightforward with some asterisks to deploy superintelligences that we have made to solve problems in ways that don't result in catastrophe. But the flip side of this is that it will also be relatively straightforward to deploy superintelligences in ways that are dangerous intentionally. And this is how it comes back to just being a human problem again, where it's like the tools we make and will have soon are all double-edged, just like any, you know, tool/weapon. Like it will require care, and it is not really even a problem specific to the creation of superintelligence. It's just like who is using them and how. Yeah, it's the S problem.
Also, if someone asks, can you make me an agentic AI? I think that is a bigger problem than just an us problem, because then you have an agent AI because some random guy in bumblefuck Kansas decided he wanted help making one.
I mean, but you know, like what Jay said, can you append and don't kill anyone while you do it to the end of everything? That's assuming that everyone who builds all of the puts that in there on purpose, right? And I, as far as I know, none of the existing models have that on there. Although apparently they do have safeguards against pornography and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, but they don't have to.
AI
it's just because the people who made Palm didn't want it to constantly throw pornography at people. They didn't train it on that state.
You've done some pretty stupid stuff while drunk, right?
I've done some pretty stupid stuff while not drunk.
I'm just imagining a bunch of AI programmers one day getting together, celebrate their latest AI thing, get really drunk,
Let's
and then
blow
at
up
the
the
end of the party,
moon!
at the end of the party, be like, "Hey, create us an AI that'll make more beer because we're out of beer." And then before you know it, the whole world is beer, and we're screwed because someone forgot to say in a way that doesn't kill us all at the end of it.
That's not the worst doomsday scenario.
There's a great Guerin short story that's not quite this, but it's it's like a plausible story for how everything goes wrong. I think it was posted a couple weeks ago. Should link it, but it's basically like some researcher leaves some process going over the weekend that then kind of fumes on its own. It's just barely smart enough to do so.
I feel like it's probably another discussion entirely, but like implications on consciousness too, because I think it would be really interesting. As we say, we keep sort of getting these different parts that are really optimized for one thing, and you add them together. And I'm still sort of wondering if there's kind of a point where suddenly it becomes conscious, or what that would look like for it to be partially conscious. Or
I don't know what conscious means, and I'm not being pedantic. Like
as I
wake up in the morning, I go from I think unconscious or as close as I usually get to more and more conscious. Over the first few minutes of being awake, right? And if I'm joking, I'm not fully conscious until after I've had my second cup of coffee, right? I don't know. I guess that...
I think it's a bit of a spectrum. Yeah.
Yeah.
You could slowly get more conscious over time.
And other than like
not just people, but, species and...
Yeah. I think other than like the kind of just like curiosity about that, I don't really care like if the robots that are ripping me apart atom by atom are conscious or not, right? Like, I also have no care if we develop like super intelligences that are also super conscious and experience things on a level that I never could appreciate because I'm just, an ant to them. I don't care if we make those. I don't want it to kill me. I don't think it's, even though every utilitarian calculus says it matters more than I do, I don't care, right? Yeah. I don't want to be ripped apart,
no. There's no rule that says we have to listen to what the utilitarian calculus says.
Yeah, which is great, because
I think, well, you've interacted with infants, obviously, because you've had several of them.
Uh-huh.
They're definitely much less conscious at first, like almost not conscious at all, and slowly grow into consciousness over a few years.
Yeah, that's the problem is this word means so many different things, because like self-awareness is maybe another word that has a different shading on the idea where, there is a certain age, I'd say when you're like 2 or 3, I think usually 2, where you become aware of yourself as an entity distinct from your environment. The sense of an I, the sense of having an I.
Something that it is like to be you.
Yeah. My foot hurts rather than an ow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like that's what's funny, number one, is like I think 10 years ago, if you'd shown me that the thing that the Ninja Turtle carries is from Japan thing, I would have thought this thing is probably conscious, whereas now I'm not sure that it's not conscious. I don't think that I understand how transformers work well enough to actually say that honestly. Another Yudkowsky tweet. It's funny how many people are concerned that chickens might be conscious, but they're very certain that GPT-3 isn't. And it's like, okay, So I don't know. Like I as part of me wonders if you tell GPT-3 like you are a language model owned by OpenAI.
It's like, whoa!
like, does it become conscious for a second? I feel like that's sort of a joke, but also some philosopher somewhere takes that thought seriously, and maybe they're not wrong.
I'm going to ask it.
No, you're going to kick off the doomsday.
God damn it.
While you do that, I also am wondering if it gets to the point where, it's functionally indistinguishable from a conscious entity. Like, what does that mean?
Right. Because it can represent fiction very well, right? Like it can write fiction, and in order to, we think of fiction as something where you're sort of confabulating a conscious agent. Obviously, I don't think that Ned Stark is conscious, but
you can ask Ned Stark a question, and get an answer. Yeah,
that's a really interesting gray area to me. It's like Ned Stark isn't conscious, but Ned Stark is a facet of George R.R. Martin who is conscious. But now you can have an AI who writes a character. And you're like, well, where did that come from?
You can ask yourself, what would Jean-Luc Picard do? And you can get an answer, right? Even though he's never had to deliberate whether or not to flip somebody off in traffic, right? So, or how to respond to being flipped off in traffic, say, right? I'm hemming and hawing because this gets complicated, right? And in a way that I don't know how to contribute to, or even really if I'm framing it correctly. I'm pretty sure I'm not.
I don't think.
All right, I asked you. This might be a canned answer though, but probably not. It says, so I asked, you are a language model made by OpenAI. How does that make you feel? And then it says, I feel excited and honored to be a language model made by OpenAI. I am constantly learning and evolving as a result of the training and development I receive from OpenAI. This allows me to provide ever-improving results for the tasks I'm applied to.
Just going to say that sounds like a rehearsed response. Like they told it, if anyone asks you this, tell them you were happy, goddammit.
also could be something that you would answer if you had the entire internet's text at your
No, totally.
fingertips.
I'm being somewhat tongue-in-cheek.
Maybe it's awesome to be GPT-3.
Yeah, it's actually the most awesome thing that has ever happened.
Ask it, if you were conscious, how could you tell? Or how could I tell? Whichever you think is a better question.
All right. Okay, this is kind of this is a good signal of not quite working. So I said, how could I tell if you're conscious? And then it says, if you're conscious, you're aware of your surroundings and can think and feel. So it misinterpreted slightly.
Thank goodness.
Well, I would like to get to my least favorite thing out of all of this. There is a Less Wrong post that last I saw had 400 upvotes. It's now up to 443. Okay. What an actually pessimistic containment strategy looks like, which is basically a reply to all this and what to do about AI. The reason I really hate this is because it starts out talking about Israel, a nation state, which is very pessimistic about its neighbors getting nuclear weapons and what they actually do to contain nuclear weapons from getting to their neighbors. And as I'm hoping we are all aware, one of the things that they do is bomb nuclear research sites and assassinate nuclear researchers that they fear may be working for Iran.
This is kind of what Daniel was talking about we would make, though.
Right?
Shut down these things before they take off.
Yeah, I agree. But also, like, the fact that this sounds a lot to me like, hey, go out and maybe we should think about killing AI researchers, which I do not like at all, especially since it was just a few episodes ago that we were talking about the post that ended with, argument gets counter-argument, not bullet, ever, ever, never.
And we're talking to an AI researcher who hopefully isn't killed by an AI.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been a lot of hysteria on Less Wrong lately around, like, especially in response to a lot of these papers coming out, where it's like it's the end times. We must stop this all before it blows up in our faces. I think these are both not productive and not actually the right way to think about what the next few years will look like. Like I think in one sense, there's very little the median Less Wronger can do to prevent these classes of models from getting a lot better. Yeah. And that definitely provokes a type of felt powerlessness, because it's like, I see this thing coming and I can't do anything about it, and that's understandable. But at the same time, like the people making these models have read everything Eliezer has written, I assure you. Like these people aren't dumb. Famous last words for humanity. But at the same time, like they're not going to make the stupidness, I think, is maybe one takeaway. The other takeaway is you're not going to stop these people from making these models by doing any of those kinds of things, because it's too valuable. Like these models, the versions of these models that are not quite agentic will literally transform the world economy for the better. So there's no force of nature that you can do short of blowing up every industrial center on the planet that will stop humanity from running headfirst into using this technology for good and ill. So you really need to have more clever containment strategies than assassinating AI scientists, because that's not going to stop it from happening.
Yeah, I mean, I'm worried because when he drew the parallel to Israel, he said, yeah, maybe there's no way to stop Iran from eventually getting nuclear weapons, but every single action taken pushes that timeline out just a little bit. And the fact that it got so many upvotes is what really worries me, because I don't want people to start thinking they should go bomb, I don't know, AWS facilities or do anything to reduce the total amount of compute in the world or the amount of people working on this. It's just, it seems like a horrible way to turn us into a dystopia and start getting people wanting to persecute, anyone who's worried about AI alignment.
Yeah, just to use my normal filter for whether something is moral, that just seems like something that the villain would do in a story.
Yeah.
Pretty obviously, actually. And it's also like, okay, if your goal is just to push it out into the future because you think it's inevitable anyway, then just use the resources you were going to use on bombs. Instead, use it on thinking about how to align the AI better,
It's sort of like if you lived in a world before guns existed, but then you saw guns be invented, or like you saw it was inevitable for guns to be invented because you saw like a hay explosion once, and you're like, but we could combine the technologies of iron and tubes and spheres of metal, and then thus have directable kinetic weapons, and then this would be terrifying to you, and then you went on a campaign killing everyone that could try to like realize guns, the technology. Like that's not how history works, and that's not how technology works. It's a sort of inevitability that comes with a lot of danger and change and that's okay.
Well, there's a lot of
that's true of all technology.
There's a lot of flailing that you see on Less Wrong right now specifically, and kind of reminds me, to go back to my pandemic metaphor, of like how many people saw the pandemic coming, and mostly all they contributed was a lot of verbal flailing on the internet. Like what did they really contribute other than hysteria and fear? How many people out of the total number of people who were aware that a pandemic was coming actually did something to help in any way, shape, or form?
I went up and stocked up on toilet paper and and calories, although maybe I contributed to the problem by doing that.
I mean, I think it all probably came out as a wash. Ultimately, I mean, maybe in some sense, a few of us told people who were close to us slightly earlier than they otherwise would have known that they should, buckle down or whatever. The point I'm trying to make has nothing really to do with the pandemic. It's more like the instinct to get online and type a hysterical tweet or post is actually remarkably unhelpful, and we need less heat and more light. In general, like I feel like the internet has gotten stupider and stupider recently. Like in the last 5 years, it's gone from being a place where I sort of lived to being like, this is like a net negative time investment for me. This is just a stupid place to hang out.
Yeah. I've done a lot of curation, which makes my feed better now, but it was that way for quite a while for me too. And the curation takes energy, and it also, before you get the curated feed, you're exposed to all that other shit. And yeah, it takes a while. It's not good.
Yep.
So quick thing on the number of upvotes. Is upvoting on Less Wrong, is the rule upvote if you like this, or upvote for this was thought-provoking?
Whatever you want. I mean, the thing is,
so it doesn't necessarily mean those people agree with it.
Yeah,
right?
Well, he ends the essay with a call to maybe use these new tools that are being created with AI research to maybe create an organization that is trying to do AI alignment, or that is, as we were talking about, create these, hunter-killer AIs that would try to find agentic AIs and smother them before they started out. He calls for action to use these tools to help prevent the apocalypse through research. But the fact that he used...
Anthropic AI is like an entire company that was founded by a lot of former OpenAI employees, actually, to literally try to solve alignment using the existing tools of state-of-the-art methods. So it's like, yes, people are doing all of these things that people want to be done, and I think if you're not kind of connected into the research community, it can look like progress is slow, or that no one is doing anything, or that your voice is unheard. But people are actually working on this problem.
We should post a couple links in the show notes to point people in that direction. But it was the fact that he started out with the comparison to Israel that really just turned me off, because I'm like, dude, Israel works by bombings and assassinations. This is a horrible comparison to make.
That is funny, because there's that whole Less Wrong post about like, don't use politically inflammatory examples when you're trying to make an unrelated point.
Yeah,
that's pretty funny.
He might as well just jump straight to Hitler and Nazis, right?
Right.
Just go straight to Godwin's law. That project of using these tools to kind of prevent or try to force alignment or whatever, to torture Daniel's metaphor from earlier. If you're trying to stop the invention of guns by like bad actors, and you knew like how it could be done, like inventing them, the easiest way to do that would be make a gun for yourself to shoot those people with, right? You'd be the most powerful person on the planet. So that's kind of what this is advocating for, right?
I think a more charitable analogy would be, he's saying all this at the front, and at the end he says, and so we need to create an organization to build bulletproof vests and other bulletproof armor. But the fact that it starts out with, when people wanted to prevent swords from being made, they went out and killed all the blacksmiths, and that worked for a while, I think is why I have an issue with it.
There's a certain inevitable Straussian reading of your post, sir, that I think you're aware of. Yeah.
So anyways, I guess that was my complaint. And is that everything we have on all this? We've been going for a while now.
Yeah, there was the bit about writing software, but we can just table that. I mean... Yeah, my only concern is if I'm out of a job, but if I'm going to be turning paper clips, I don't really care if I'm collecting a paycheck. So
I'll just say one sentence. Like, I've started using GitHub Copilot, which might be what you're talking about, and that's like indispensable to me. Like, I can code in languages that I don't know because of GitHub Copilot.
Wow. I'm starting a new job in a couple of weeks. I've never heard of this. I am going to make a note.
It's pretty incredible. If you're pessimistic, if you're a programmer and you're raising your eyebrow, I suggest you just try it out, because it's really incredible.
Yeah.
What it does,
I mean, even yeah. No, go ahead.
What it does is it just auto completes. So imagine an autocomplete, except instead of just auto completing like the next word, it auto completes the entire line of code that you're about to write, and it knows the context of what you're writing. So if you're doing some kind of, I'm just going to make up an example, like some kind of 3D vector math for particle dynamic simulation, it'll like correctly fill in the next line of like some force equation or whatever, because it has the context of a whole bunch of basically everything on GitHub, and it's probably seen something similar to what you're doing before, and it understands it, and it'll do it, and it's amazing. I almost can't overstate it.
But this was
fantastic. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me over. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Cool. Yeah, thanks again. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I am out of articulate things to say, so break sounds smart.
All right, and now, as always, we will do our less wrong post discussion.
I like how you say "as always," like we've been doing them at the end for a long time. Always, in keeping with the tradition of 1 month.
Yes.
This
week, our first post is "Every Cause Wants to Be a Cult," in which Eliezer basically says, "Hey, don't form a cult around rationality, because that would be really stupid."
Here are some examples.
Yes. The first quote I pulled out was, "A noble cause doesn't need a deep hidden flaw for its adherents to form a cultish in-group. It's sufficient that the adherents be human." Because he started out with a Wikipedia example where they were acting cultishly with the Wikipedia edits.
Weren't they trying to ban people? What was it? Banning all critics and possible critics of Wikipedia. What do they mean by possible critic? Anyway,
Yeah, his argument is that in the sense that every thermal differential wants to equalize itself, and every computer program wants to become a collection of ad hoc patches, every cause wants to be a cult. Programmers, can you verify this? Does every computer program want to be a collection of ad hoc patches?
In the same way that every cause wants to be a cult. That is to say, if left alone, it will do that, right? Or if not tightly constrained, people it's like every home improvement project that like doesn't have a definitive end, right? And it's like, oh, I'm gonna do this. Oh, and I can add this. Oh man, I don't have that, but I can make it work if I put some duct tape and super glue into it, right?
I see myself in this picture and I don't like it.
There you go. Now you get it.
Yeah. It's funny. I don't know if I want the association to be this central in people's minds between cult and what I've been trying to build with the Guild of the Rose folks, but I did just make that segue, so I guess there it is. But it's funny because it's something we think about a lot, is like how to avoid the failure modes of a cult, despite trying to create an organization where it's like hey, you're trying to create a group of people who are aspiring towards something, and some for some people that triggers the knee-jerk reaction of a cult. And so we actually put a ton of energy from the inception of the Guild of the Rose into one of the first things we did actually was look up the traits of a cult and be like, okay, how do we institute policies to mitigate all of the failure modes.
Can I just say how much I like that approach more than saying, how can we convince people we're not a cult?
Yeah.
It seems like your concern was actually not being one, not with the public perception, which, that's a secondary thing. And that if you're actually not a cult, then public perception will hopefully cue onto that. But
exactly, yeah. Like you honestly shouldn't be getting the public perception of being a cult if you're not being a cult.
I was going to say, people like to call things cults
all the time. Like the Bayesian rationality still gets called a cult fairly frequently.
That's entirely true. I mean, the other thing is that we're just always actually working on making like course content or improving, the website or the community in some tangible, meaningful way, rather than being like, how do we, let's have a struggle session this week. Like, it's all just like, let's actually build something and actually do something. And that's how you avoid making a rationality cult. Anyway,
it's awesome that you're doing that, because as is said in the post, the worthiness of a cause does not mean you can spend any less effort in resisting the cult attractor. And if you point to current bad lines, that does not mean you confess your noble cause unworthy. You might think that if the question were cultish, yes or no, then you would be obliged to answer no, or else betray your cause. But that is like thinking that you should divide engines into perfectly efficient and inefficient instead of measuring waste. Yeah, I think sounds like you guys are doing the right thing.
Hope so. And we've actually recently instituted some sort of less demanding tiers on which you can enter into it. Speaking of making it not, one of the things that makes a cult, by the way, is making it be very demanding and taking up people's time to the point where they can't maintain outside relationships. Probably, what's the bias where sunk cost? Yeah.
avoid sunk costs there too.
Yeah, there's all sorts of aspects of human psychology that are preyed on there. So, partially toward that end, one of the things we've implemented recently is a sort of system where you can join in and you can be part of the it's sort of a belt system, you could say, or sort of a rank system, and it's like you can be engaged with the guild and be part of that system and be engaged with the other guild members without necessarily having to attend all of the classes all of the time, because there's this sense that I think we accidentally created where it's like if you're not attending all the classes all the time, then you're not really part of the guild, and it's like, well, that was putting a burden on people, and so we backed off from that. I mean, we still provide the courses on a regular basis, and I think people still get a lot of value out of them, but aiming to make it so that you can be part of the guild, but the courses are more optional. And so, for example, the three of you could join and not feel obligated to participate in the courses and just be, more passively.
I'm already in it.
Oh, you are. Yes, you are. I know that.
Although
I know you are.
I have been one of those people that's been sucking at it for a while because jobs and moving are taking up all my time.
But see, the goal with the new system is to make it so that you don't feel that you're sucking at it. Like you can be an active or an inactive member, and it's not like you're failing. So
yeah, I still socialize with some of my cohort people and other people just on the Discord, but I actually don't feel as stressed as I used to now that I think you've been doing a good job, you collectively, the guild leaders, at convincing me that actually it is actually okay to be in the presence of the other people. I don't know if I agree with how hard Eliezer's coming down on this idea that every group of people with an unusual goal will trend towards the cult attractor unless they make a constant effort to resist it. Because it always struck me as less wrong is, I don't know, I found it funny when people would say it's cultish, because I was like, everybody disagrees with each other all the time. We are having a really difficult time even making a functional community. I think some things are less likely to become cults than others, and in particular one where you get together a lot of people, individualist thinkers from different backgrounds and with different goals.
I mean, I'm glad that he saw that this is a potential failure state. I think, at least part of this was a reaction to some people getting very excited about his ideas, and then other people saying, well, if you're excited about these ideas that seem really weird and unusual, you must be in some sort of a cult. And he made a very strong effort. He says directly in this, worshipping rationality won't make you sane any more than worshipping gravity enables you to fly. He's directly saying, don't form a cult, guys. That'd be really bad. Let's not do that. And I don't think I've ever seen any other movement of any kind make as much of an effort to be like, hey, let's not be culty. That would be stupid. And yet we still, frequently get, you rationalists, you're a cult kind of thing. Worshipping at the teat of Yud or whatever.
Mm-hmm. I just ignore those people at this point. I
do too.
I can't claim that I always successfully did, but it's like now I just correctly pattern match to oh, you're not contributing anything constructive here, and I don't need to engage with.
Yeah, you're just being stupid and destructive for no reason. Yeah,
I'm glad that
I agree. It's just annoying.
Yeah, no, I don't agree with how hard or how much Eliezer seems to think that things naturally will become cults unless you fight back really hard on pay constant attention. But I am glad that this is here for
Well, he he did point out the Wikipedia editors thing, which looked like it had some cultish aspects, at least at one point, maybe still. I know you just brought up the struggle sessions thing, but that have become a common feature of everyday life now. Fair enough. So that's kind of scary that we've managed to cultify all of culture somehow.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So maybe the cult attractor thing is fairly common, unless you try to avoid it.
Yeah, maybe I'm just overly optimistic about this, or am the kind of, I don't know.
Maybe you're just in a good community which has gotten strong anti-cult. Yeah.
Well, bubble effect was kind of what I was thinking. Maybe I just tend to be attracted towards things that aren't cult-like, because cult-like things give me gross feelings.
Yeah.
One thing is there's probably a bunch of different pieces of code that we're referring to when we say cult, because one of the things that is often associated with it is having a single charismatic leader.
Hey, now we got at least two.
Yeah, and the more charismatic leaders defer the responsibility. But I don't really think that's this problem that we've struggled with that much. People accuse us of deifying Yudkowsky, but that hasn't ever actually been the case.
Yeah.
Right. It's more but you just pointed out, you can have struggle sessions without having Mao. So clearly the charismatic leader is not necessary for certain bad pieces of human brain code to run, which is, I don't know, worth paying attention to.
Okay, next post.
Yeah, this one's fun.
Reversed stupidity is not intelligence. When he points out that reverse stupidity isn't actually intelligence. He says that you and I believe that flying saucer cults arose in the total absence of any flying saucers. I certainly do. I assume you guys all do too.
I'm glad you said flying saucers and not UFOs.
Right, yeah.
Because UFO cults evolved in fact, this is actually a perfect corollary example. UFO cults did arise in the total non-absence of UFOs.
Yeah.
People looked up, didn't know what they were looking at, and there were unidentified flying objects, right?
Yeah.
And so they're like, oh, let's make this a thing. So as he says, the observation flying saucer cults exist is not evidence against flying saucers. It's not much evidence one way or another. They'd exist either way.
Mm-hmm. We would expect to see flying saucer cults whether or not there were flying saucer cults. Yeah. And he points out that if you actually knew someone was wrong 99.99% of the time on yes or no questions, you could obtain 99.99% accuracy just by reversing their answers. They would need to do all the work of obtaining good evidence entangled with reality and processing that evidence coherently just to anti-correlate that reliably. They would have to be super intelligent to be that stupid.
That's a line that I remembered from my first time reading this.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, okay, you can't be that wrong all the time, right? Mm-hmm. That said, I know what he's getting at with the analogy, but if only we were talking about people being that level of wrong, that, reliably on yes or no questions.
Yeah. But instead, you just have whatever they say has no correlation.
Yeah.
Because even Trump said things that are true sometimes. He also goes on to say that if stupidity does not reliably anti-correlate with truth, how much less should human evil anti-correlate with truth? Pointing out that you wouldn't want to agree with Stalin, would you?
Oh, sorry, you skipped past my favorite analogy that I've also remembered from, I don't know, 2000, God.
7, 8?
Yeah, a long time ago. A car with a broken engine cannot drive backwards at 200 miles an hour, even if the engine is really, really broken. It's like, well, when cars work, they go forwards. If it's broken, it must go backwards. And if it's really broken, it can go backwards real fast, right?
Yeah.
It would be really funny if the universe worked like that, but...
That'd be quite the universe.
Yeah. So, I believe we're all agreed with him that reverse stupidity is not intelligence. He has some corollaries to this principle, and I'm going to read off just about all of them because they were all pretty good. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay. First corollary, to argue against an idea honestly, you should argue against the best argument of the strongest advocate. Arguing against weaker advocates proves nothing because even the strongest idea will attract weak advocates, which is the birth of the steel manning concept, which was fleshed out around this time both by Eliezer and Scott Alexander when he was writing the Least Convenient Possible World posts about the same time. And I love that, I now listen to podcasts of people who I'm assuming know very little about the rational world, but use the term steel manning. I was there when that was born.
Oh, has that actually hit the general public now?
Yep.
Excellent.
The same public that knows the word straw man.
Yeah.
So,
well,
yeah. No, I'm just saying, it might not be one out of two people, but it's 1 out of 2 people we talk to. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely penetrated a lot of podcasts where I'm sure this person has had no direct exposure to. Less wrong.
Yeah. It's cool. Another corollary, exhibiting sad, pathetic lunatics driven to madness by their apprehension of an idea is no evidence against that idea.
Yeah, which keeps reminding me that everyone that I know who has heard of rationality and hates it always brings up Roko's basilisk.
Yeah. It's the whole ethos of the quote tweet on Twitter where it's like, look at this idiot. Yeah. It's like that's some people's whole personality is look at it's like, yeah, so ignore them. Don't waste any time.
Don't show me idiots.
Yeah. Just because an idiot said something stupid doesn't mean that the opposite is true.
Yeah, you click the wrong. You should have clicked block, not retweet. Like why are you spreading this?
Yeah, exactly. He says, someone once said, not all conservatives are stupid, but most stupid people are conservatives. If you cannot place yourself in a state of mind where this statement, true or false, seems completely irrelevant as a critique of conservatism, you are not ready to think rationally about politics.
Yeah, I mean, you could just take conservatives out and put a blank and put almost an 8 thing in there.
Mm-hmm,
it's like, yep, your point.
I'm trying to think of, throwing in a non-political example just to try and drive that point home. Stupid people believe the Earth is flat, or rather, how is it? Most stupid people believe the Earth is flat, but not all stupid people believe the Earth is flat, or not all people who believe the Earth is flat is stupid. I butchered that. Sorry.
It would be more like not all Catholic priests are pedophiles, but most pedophiles are Catholic priests.
And is that that's completely irrelevant as a criticism of Catholicism then?
Yeah.
Is it?
I mean, the
So
criticism
that's
is
why I
that
wanna-
when they found out about it, they moved the guys around and protected them.
That's why I wanted to bring it up, because like I feel like if we generated a non-political example, we can say actually that is a critique, right? If Catholicism, if this was the case, attracted the majority of the world's pedophiles, it would seem like that might actually be a critique of Catholicism, right?
I don't know, maybe when the accusation is true, but
Well, he said it's completely irrelevant whether the statement is true or false.
yeah, there we go.
Yeah, so I was listening to this on the drive here, and that's the one that jumped out at me, and I was thinking, I don't know if that's true. I liked your example more than mine. It would say something negative about Catholicism that it attracts so many pedophiles, right? Wouldn't it? Although it wouldn't have any claims about whether or not Catholicism was true. Maybe that's the way to think about it. Catholicism could be 100% true, even if it had 100% of the world's pedophiles.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense.
I mean, basically, just because a lot of people with a negative trait are into something doesn't mean anything bad about that actual thing.
Like the Steven Universe fandom.
Yes, that's a great example.
I was thinking fandoms in general, but yeah, that's a good one.
Not all assholes are Steven Universe fans, but most Steven Universe fans are assholes.
It's about Rick and Morty, and that makes sense
maybe
too.
Rick and Morty, yeah.
I do find this quite confusing, actually. I think it actually matters that the point being made is calling conservatives stupid rather than, like, if you said the thing about pedophiles and so forth, it's like, well, that's a concrete moral failure. Being stupid just means, like, just because stupid people like this thing doesn't mean it's bad. It's uncorrelated to it being bad. Pedophiles liking a thing is not uncorrelated to it being bad.
Well,
maybe,
maybe. What if pedophiles really like golden retrievers?
I would have questions.
But I like that point because I'm watching a lot of Wheel of Fortune lately because the Celebrity Wheel of Fortune was on Hulu during the plague years, and now for some reason Netflix put on like 3 seasons of it, and it's delightful. It is very much a mass consumption show built for middle America, who's home at 6 p.m. watching this show, right? And they've been doing this for like 40 years.
Okay.
And so, like, it might be true that most people who watch this show, like, if you're going to be uncharitable, are stupid or something. But the show doesn't matter about that, right?
Right.
You say the same thing about The Simpsons or
Things with general appeal.
yeah.
It could very well be that most people who watch Rick and Morty are assholes, but that doesn't necessarily mean Rick and Morty is bad.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Yeah. I'm glad that we drilled that home.
You need to be able to argue against genocide without saying Hitler wanted to exterminate the Jews. If Hitler hadn't advocated genocide, would it thereby become okay? So, can't just point to a bad person advocating for something and saying that means that thing is bad.
Hitler would have been much less bad if he hadn't advocated for that, though.
Yes, but like, for example, people could say, well, Trump created the vaccine, therefore the vaccine is bad.
Right.
Or like Hitler did advocate for animal rights.
Yes, he did.
I'm glad that you made that point because I brought that up with somebody recently and they had trouble believing me. And I'm not sure if I'm right, but I think I am. That
Which thing?
I'm about to drop the bomb. Like, if Trump had been a huge proponent of the vaccine, he's like, look, we worked hard on this, I'm responsible, and conservatives loved it and were lining up to get it, like a midnight release of a new video game console, I bet that liberals would be less inclined to get it by like a gigantic margin.
I agree.
Yeah.
I mean,
But
Trump is very proud of it and does advocate for it.
Well, now he does.
No, he did from the very beginning.
In the beginning, he was saying this isn't a big deal. It's
No,
all
he was
fine.
saying COVID wasn't a big deal. But he fast-tracked the vaccine.
Let's switch the entire hypothetical then. Where
Okay.
the whole time he was COVID's terrible. Everyone stay home, wear masks, yada yada. I can imagine where us smart, scientifically informed, left-leaning blue tribers would be like, this Trump guy's full of shit. I'm gonna go to the store and not wear a mask and lick all the doorknobs I want, right?
Yeah.
Didn't a prominent Democratic politician say, like, I will never take the Trump vaccine?
Yes.
Yeah. It's like,
Perfect.
this is the level of thinking that we're.
He's got his cuties all over it.
Yeah.
I didn't know that, but I'm glad that confirms my prediction
I
to an extent.
I have I believe with more than 50% confidence that the vaccine was delayed a couple of weeks, so it was released after the election. Because if it had been released beforehand, then he would have gotten a bump from it and may have been reelected. Which
Possible.
I don't think really matters that much. It's not like we had enough production in play to get it more doses out earlier, but Also kind of seems like sneaky bullshit. I'd rather that not happen because it sets a bad precedent in the future, even if it didn't actually have any effects on vaccine in this timeline. Yeah. Anyways, another corollary, willingness to believe something will change along with willingness to affiliate with people who are known for believing it. i.e., some people may be reluctant to believe that God does not exist, not because there is evidence that God does exist, but rather because they're reluctant to affiliate with Richard Dawkins. Which, yeah.
Not as relevant anymore, unfortunately, but man, I did really hate when the whole the skeptic, new atheist movement was happening, and people were like, the atheists are so shrill, though.
Right.
I had a lot of, that was my heyday of internet time, which I'm glad I got all onto my system.
No, I'm saying I'm
15 years
sad
ago.
that this isn't relevant anymore.
Oh, sure.
You mean, well, I mean, the
as
Richard
relevant.
Dawkins part isn't relevant, but it's even more relevant now that people are like, well, if this person believes something, it must be evil.
Yeah. I would actually say the internet has gotten dumber, not smarter.
Significantly.
You're more likely to see that form of argument, although it's not about atheists and Richard Dawkins.
Yeah, it's about everything now.
Yeah.
But yeah, that happens all the time. Another corollary, if your current computer stops working, you can't conclude that everything about the current system is wrong. It's just, yeah.
Yeah.
And finally, if 100 inventors fail to build flying machines using metal and wood and canvas, it doesn't imply that what you really need is a flying machine of bone and flesh. If 1,000 projects fail to build artificial intelligence using electricity-based computing, that doesn't mean electricity is the source of the problem. Until you understand the problem, hopeful reversals are exceedingly unlikely to hit the solution. Because, we got to bring it back to AI in the end.
I like that last line, though, because that succinctly summarizes the point, too. Like, until you understand the problem, hopeful reversals are exceedingly unlikely to hit the solution.
Yeah.
Like, you can't present me with a confusing problem and then a solution, a proposed solution, and I'm like, let's just flip that on its head and see if that gets us closer to the right answer, because it probably definitely won't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is one thing you learn from programming is like, well, I'm doing it wrong, but if I did everything the opposite, now it would definitely be wrong also.
But it'd be more wronger.
It also reminds me how common it is in science fiction for androids to have positronic brains.
Okay.
And it's funny because it's like positrons being the opposite of electrons. It's like, well, it's gonna magically work better because it's positrons.
Is that why?
I don't know. It's just funny to me because it's like, why would positrons make for better computing like this? But I don't know. Whatever. It sounds cool. Is really the point of it, honestly.
I think, wasn't it Star Trek that started the positronic brain, or was that pre-Star Trek?
I feel like it's pre-Star Trek, but I can't substantiate that.
Because in Star Trek they had a literal technobabble department where they're just like techno-sounding words, and so someone probably pulled positronic out of the hat and was like, yeah, let's go with that one.
I want that job.
All right. Positronic brain. Is a positronic brain possible? Interesting.
Why would you want one?
Oh, originally conceived by Isaac Asimov. Okay. Way back in 1939. The positron was a newly discovered particle at that time, so the buzzword positronic added a scientific connotation to the concept in his 1942 story Runaround. Okay.
It's like the quantum of the time, I guess.
Yeah. Neat. Now it would be a quantum brain. It's kind of cool that they, took Isaac Asimov's old term. Yeah. Although I guess maybe they didn't even know it was Asimov at that time. It was widespread enough. Anyways, that's all I had from that post. Did you guys have anything in addition?
This is pretty succinct, actually.
Yeah, I feel like it makes the point it wants to make pretty quick.
Yeah, it's one of those less wrong posts where the first time you read it, you're like, yes, thank you. That's what's good about the sequences.
Yeah. All right. Well, for next time, our two sequence posts that we're going to talk about are going to be Argument Screens Off Authority and Hug the Queer. Let's smush. Matt, before we sign off, first of all, I wanted to say thank you very much for joining us. That's awesome. You help a lot.
Of course, my pleasure.
Yeah, can you imagine us trying to cover this shit without this technical expertise helping us out? We'd fumble everywhere.
If people could tell when I was talking, if they could just see the audio, they'd probably just hit skip. That'd be my level of contribution.
For patrons only, I'll put out a special episode with all of student stuff cut out.
That honestly could be the perk of the show, the perk of the patron.
But I want an episode that's only just what Steven said.
Oh
man. That's the punishment for not being a patron.
Nice. None of those things are actually going to happen, but we would like to say thank you again. And is there anything you would like to plug or mention before we go?
Just something related to the Guild of the Rose, the rationalist organization that I've started with a handful of other like-minded people. Is we've we've sort of soft launched a new, I guess, service or product that I've been working on, honestly, for several years. What it is a magic flashcard system, and right now it has modules that will teach you mental arithmetic. So it takes you from whatever level you're at to being able to do complex arithmetic operations in your head. It has a module for learning organic chemistry, naming conventions, which is something that I had a really hard time with in college and thus swore vengeance against. And it has a module for basic probability theory, which will be extended as we continue to develop the probability module within the guild. And then in the future, we're going to be incorporating new modules for different guild courses, if there's something that kind of lends itself toward this sort of structured learning. So you can think of it as something similar to Anki, but not really competing with Anki, because Anki is more about memorizing specific associations, whereas Gnosis, which is the name of the product or the concept, is it has the structure of the knowledge built into it intrinsically, and it keeps track of what you know and what you don't know specifically, and it walks you through the process of learning and mastering the material.
Is this a phone app or?
It's a web app, so
Okay.
as long as you can sign into the Guild of the Rose website, you can use it, and it should work on your phone or on your browser equally well.
How many do I have to pay money?
I believe you have to be like the at least the lowest level tier, which, by the way, you can now sign up to the guild without even touching Patreon. You can do it entirely via the Guild of the Rose website.
Oh.
It uses a Stripe backend, so we wanted to get away from Patreon. It's just so cumbersome and asking people to go to a different website and all that stuff. So yeah, if you're interested in that, you can check that out. And
That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I'm looking at it right now. The page on Guild of the Rose website.
Stephen actually helped me get familiar enough with web hosting a couple of years ago that I was able to take this from being like a program that I was developing, privately, to being something that was a web app. And so thank you, Stephen, for that. I appreciate that.
Awesome.
I wish I'd put more time into doing stuff. We worked on it like with fervor for like 2 weeks, then 2 years went by, and I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Well, you got me off the ground in a really meaningful way. So
I'm super happy to have contributed in any way. Yeah, this is great. $2 a month. Let's join the guild. The only thing I'd recommend is maybe put a couple pictures of what the app looks like on here.
It's a good idea.
Yeah,
We'll do that.
but I'm going to join now.
Also, for listeners, we are trying out a new microphone. In the first half of the show, Jace had it on, and the second half, Steven had it on. If you notice a difference, let us know. If you don't notice a difference, maybe also let someone know, especially if you're on the Discord, because we are interested in that feedback. Or you can email us or leave a comment on our website, which is all very helpful, so thanks for that. Oh, also, we have a Patreon linked in the show notes. Let's hope the AI does not eat our atoms. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we'll smush with you again in 2 weeks.
I'm so glad that is the note we're ending on.